works around 3 hours, so it's not often.
10:30, so you say 10:30 to 1 o'clock.
Sometimes late in the afternoon, but it's generally early afternoon is when.
So you say that a couple of days. Now what happens the rest of the days, the rest of the week?
Empty.
Empty as far as?
The only thing that's there is the.
How many judges do you have working that are basically doing Skyping and internet access?
Okay, so we have a pool. We have a pool of judges that are not on site, and as needed, the court administrator contacts them beforehand that they should come to be present when as needed. So we have a pool of around 15 judges who they're not on site.
But when they need to come, they have to come and
when they need to come, yes.
And that's at the request of the administrator.
Correct.
But they don't all come at once?
No.
What do you anticipate the maximum between people learning in the co-level over there and the litigants and judges? What's the maximum you would have in the building at one time?
Well, assuming that there's a court case.
You said before you have 3 floors. You have offices on the top,
right.
You have the courtroom on the bottom,
Okay.
and then you have
Right.
where they teach the judges on the middle floor.
Okay, so the basement where the courtroom is 99% of the time empty, devoid of humanity, because it's not necessary. Total amount, well, if there is a court case in session, fine. You could have 20, well, you know, 5 there and another 5 up on top. You could have 25 people there. Easily.
Do we have plans? We have plans for the shul. I don't see the plans for the base of rock.
It's not.
Base of rock, excuse me. Any plans? The board secretary doesn't see plans. No, not
Sorry?
Mr. Chairman.
No, it's not. This is not a biofuel.
Be quiet.
We're supposed to be adding. You should have both.
Do you have copies of the plans for the critical court building? Brian?
We have about 30 plans for the shul. That's the reason.
Brian, do we have plans for the building? We have, okay, fine. Are they on the easel or no?
I don't have the.
All right.
I have not.
Well, I just, for my own purpose, I want to know. We're going to mark it later on, right? We'll mark it into evidence, perhaps when Brian testifies.
I
questions?
No, it's based on what was testified to. Just some questions to get some clarity. Okay, so you had said that the third floor is rooms for consulting?
There's offices for the administration,
Right.
and then there's shared spaces for, there are sometimes consulting, or when they have to meet together, right, you can see that up there.
So on the floor plans, it showed also that there's offices and litigation rooms and rooms now conference rooms on the first floor also, on the ground floor.
So, okay, there's the basement, first floor, and second floor.
Okay, so the basement, how big is the courtroom? How big is just the footprint of the basement, the room itself? Okay, so then, let me ask you that. As this, you had mentioned that the basement is just one big courtroom, which is a big huge room.
No,
That has just high-tech screens and,
no, let's clarify, no, the basement is a courtroom
right?
with, there's actually on the plan,
Right.
there's also a room for the administrator and the court secretary, and 2 litigant rooms.
I think there's an officer too also in the top floor, isn't it?
Besides that, you're talking the
The
basement.
basement, yeah. Maybe you should take a look at it.
The plans where
I
they,
see. Is that,
the plans that are shown here shows 8 offices.
Right. So I guess the concern is that there's a lot of different rooms. So there's 15 people, that's a fixed number.
There should be 5 offices, the 8 offices are on the plan. If you have that.
It's the only one that we have.
Just the right plan, yeah.
So do you have something current that we can see? Okay, so let's see it.
okay, because that, yeah, that's one here.
So when you did say that when there is court session, for the most part, there's no participants, the litigants are not there, it's mostly.
The court, the judges are there, but they're not, like, we do a lot of teleconferences.
Right.
And they just sit down, judges sit
And
down.
they watch that.
So it's not on the phone, it's with the.
But are there actually cases where the litigants are there?
I'd say around twice a week.
Oh, that the litigants are there.
Yes.
So the rest of this, what you're saying is that the majority of the week is teleconferencing, et cetera.
Yes, correct.
And it's twice a week we have
Correct.
litigants there.
Correct.
And that takes place during the day, the evening ones, that takes
Yes.
place during the day. So, and how many people are generally there between witnesses and rabbis?
Well, it's not, so you assume there's 2 litigants,
Right.
and then there's gonna be 3 rabbis, the court secretary, and some of the administrators there as well.
Any attorneys or attorneys there also?
Sometimes. It's not that type of,
So then, that's important, and the rest of that is those additional rooms are used for Skyping and everything? Is that how it's
the
done?
additions in the basement
Right.
are when there is a court in session, to have the luxury to be able to the rabbis to confer, the judges to confer, to get some litigants into the. And this is a very common setup. If you go to Muncie, that is the setup of the court.
And what is the other rooms? What are they used for, the additional rooms? On the third floor, the top floor, there's a bunch of rooms also. What, those are offices and meeting room, consultation also.
Correct.
So who's doing the consulting of those rooms?
Well, we don't anticipate the rabbis doing most of the consulting in the basement. We anticipate most of that taking place on the second floor.
So, just so I can be clear, what you're saying is that the ground floor of the basement is being used for a courtroom, which is periodically,
Very true.
for twice a week maybe with people coming, and the rest of the week it's all teleconferencing, and the other rooms are used for the rabbis to do whatever they need to do.
No.
Conferencing, and
No,
consulting, and,
no, in the basement.
right?
There
Upstairs,
is-
I'm talking about there's other rooms.
Oh, no, okay, those yes, but in the basement, no.
So, there could be 30 rooms, and those are the same time. Easy.
You want to physically fit in?
Not fit in, I know.
No. But that's not what it's a very, it follows a protocol, what we're trying to do.
So if people come to you and say, you know, if you have opportunity to have litigation every single day, litigants coming, would you just turn that down?
Well, we can't do that because people, our would they get to us? They're not here to create a traffic jam and not to go with intent.
What's the study hall?
Pardon?
The study hall on
To
the
train judges.
first floor.
To train judges.
Huh?
To train judges, we have a code.
So how many people will be in that?
Around 14, 15.
So it
I think right
says,
now we have 12 full-time with 2, what do you call it? Rush codes,
professors. So this, it says it's 29.2, doesn't say the internal dimension, but the external 65. You take off about 8 or 10, it's probably about 55 or 56.
Okay.
So this room,
Okay.
so the study hall right now is 30 by about 55.
Okay.
Okay, so this room is, you've got, these are 4 by 2s. So this is, you got 9 across here, so that's 36. And then you got, I counted here, you got about 56. So if you take off 2 of those, that's about your width. The length is about the same. So you've got 14 people in the room about from there over to here. That's a lot of space for 14 people.
Okay. So let me just, that's a good question. This is not your standard study room in the sense that here, there's a lot of research that takes place. There's going to be a lot of books. And additionally, they don't sit, like they've got their computers and I think if you take a visit to the current location, you'll see that it doesn't have that same, it's not like in a big school on 6th Street where they sit with their little private lecterns, one next to another and study. It's not like that. It's more like a university setting where we want them to have a lot of space and we want it to be, it's a purpose-driven place.
I went to university and we didn't have that much space to go. It's a really big room for 14 people.
The only place in all of Lakewood is last days.
1,400 square feet is a lot of space.
It is a very demanding schedule. It's cumulative testing, constant, and therefore we do try and create an environment that is conducive to that.
Through the chair, please.
You have one application, but you're telling us that you operate completely separate from the shul.
Correct.
I don't understand why it's one application then.
You could.
The reason why is because the seller wanted to sell to one person. So the only way we could do it was to combine this, and after the sale, we split the lot. And we're telling you clearly how we're splitting. We're not hiding from you, but the seller was very difficult. He says, I'm not selling to 2 people, even though he knows. So we became partners. Each of us are 50% of the whole deal. But no one's trying to fool anybody. That was the nature of the
question of you then. If it's operating separate.
Correct.
But you're using the same counting of the parking lot.
Because it's different. Our offer of proof is that at best the synagogue will be used by 9 o'clock. It'll be done. Nothing will be done. The testimony will make it clear until at least 10 o'clock when the court 9:30, 10 will in operation. So there's at least a half hour between whenever the synagogue would be used in the morning before the court would be used during the day. And at night, by 6 o'clock, there's nothing in the evening. You could restrict the rabbinical court. They're not going to meet in the evening. Pragmatically, it doesn't happen. So in the evening is when the prayers take place during the week. Our testimony is the predominant portion of prayers is on weekends when the court is not in session and on holidays. Again, when the court is not in session. So our testimony is that yes, we're sharing because it's 2 different times. Each one is a different function, and one will not function when the other is there.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Fencer, in that case, will there be a contractual agreement between the 2 entities that are going to be, that there's going to be sharing tomorrow?
Yes, and this is something that's been done before on the flea market, they did the same thing in regard to the approval for the commercial space for the townhouses, because the time when the commercial space was being used was not the time for the townhouses. This is not something that's alien to Lakewood. We've had this in other.
The concept, I understand, but there will be a contractual.
Yes, there's agreement,
Because
yes.
it could be a point, once it's divided, the synagogue might turn.
Mr. Kelly, the review letter from Attorney's office talks about the requirement of cross-access
Easements, correct.
So they're gonna share the parking lot, that's the proposal.
That's correct.
Mr. Penza, my question is, when the shul's done at 9 o'clock, how many people stay in the shul during the day?
They're not there during the day.
I'm not talking about prayer, people that are praying, I'm talking about in general, maintenance or
There's no
rabbis or learning.
There's no rabbis or learning because most of the students are in BMG, so it was not intended for them to be there.
There are
That's,
thousands of students in BMG.
but you have to understand that those thousands are made up by our members, and that's why we had trouble. The testimony was that they can't even get a minion factory going. Why? Because they're praying in BMG, so they're not there during the day. There's no intent for anybody in the synagogue to be there during the day except on Shabbos and holidays. But during the week, there's none. There's no intent for anybody at this time at all to do that.
Technically, you can close the door of the shul at 9 o'clock and that's it.
That's correct, and that's what our offer testimony is, yes.
And what if there's a bris?
I'm sorry?
What if there's a bris in your,
For who?
your synagogue hall downstairs?
The rabbi said, when he testified, Rabbi Levy, that by 9 o'clock, even as a bris, they're done. He doesn't want anybody there.
He's
That's
halfway
it.
cutting, he'll just.
It'll be a cut of the wrist. It'll be a cut of the wrist.
That's not the same thing.
Listen, if you're starting at 7:30 is 1 million, it'll be done by 9 o'clock.
If the,
That's what's gonna be enforced.
excuse me,
That's what he
Mr.
wants.
Chairman, if the board approves the application, does the applicant agree that there will be restrictions in
Yes.
terms of the timing?
Yes.
All right, let's get specific.
So-
So the synagogue during the week will not be utilized
After 9:30.
Okay, oh, you said 9 o'clock.
So 9 o'clock.
That's okay.
You know what I mean, Jim?
I'll give you 9:30, I'll give you 9:30. Now, what are the hours that the court will be open during the week?
10:30 to 6:30.
Sound good, Rabbi? 10:30 to 6:30?
He said 10. Okay, he's the one there, not me.
Mr. Penza, what time does the courthouse open for the employees to get there? Forget
10.
about any other.
10,
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
At 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
All right, now,
And you
is
can put
there,
that in as a time, no problem.
after 6:30 at night during the week,
The courtroom is empty, it's it.
how about the synagogue?
The synagogue, it depends. In the winter months, I don't think there's gonna be anything going on. In the summer, there's a possibility of an afternoon prayer.
No, I'm talking about after 6:30.
No, after 6:30, the synagogue?
I'm just asking.
Yes, there is at 9 o'clock, there's 8 evening prayers. There's 3 times a day they pray. In the morning,
Let's start again. What are the hours that the synagogue will be in use during the week?
Approximately 6:30, after 6:30,
6:30 at night.
yes.
So it'll be after 6:30 because the court is still there until 6:30.
That's correct. It won't be at the same time. You can make it 7 to be on the safe side.
And will there be prayers in the synagogue during the mid-afternoon?
No.
When the court's in session, so.
No, no.
All right.
Mr. Penza, can you please move on with your, Mr. Flannery?
Mr. Chairman,
I guess.
just one quick question.
Yes.
I just want to make sure no more questions by this man.
No, you did that. One more.
If you're gonna share this parking lot,
Yes.
who owns the land? Who's gonna own that piece of property, the shul or the school? Building here? If someday, I'm just saying someday.
That's why it's a cross-access easement.
But
We'll work that out.
for some reason, you want to separate.
We can't separate it. It's not gonna happen.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Is that what this
Mr. I guess the issue is, this rabbi and the head of this base are saying X, Y, and Z. This building is probably going to last longer than their tenure in that position. It's probably last longer than all the people in this building. So we have new people in here. These don't run with the land council, right? They're not
Okay.
good. Well, how are they enforceable?
the board could require that we have a deed, in addition to the restrictions in the resolution, that we have an agreeable deed restriction.
And who would be able to enforce that?
Anyone. Certainly the township, and certainly if it's a deed restriction, it's sort of open to the public.
And even if it's not a deed restriction, it's a resolution that's there, and we agree to it, we have no problem.
No, but he asked, how do you have it run with the land?
So I'll tell you exactly what to do. What you can do is you give it to the police power. You can give the police to come on there during certain hours that are not there. They can give out tickets.
But I think the comment began with, well, not all of us are going to be here.
I hope to.
I hope you are too.
I don't know about you, but I hope this.
But is there any objection to restrictions that we're talking about being in the resolution as well as a deed
I don't
restriction?
have a problem with resolution. I have a problem with deed as a banker, because it restricts me. I know as a banker, I would have a problem financing, but I have no problem putting a resolution. None at all. There's no intent to do it. That's our intent.
Mr. President, we'd like to talk about the engineering.
Okay, any more questions over in this back? Is he
Not at
done?
this time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Over in this back, you stay around? In that case, bring Brian on.
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth so help you God?
I do. Brian Flannery Jackson, New Jersey, licensed professional engineer, professional planner. I have 4 exhibits marked here. A1 is the plan that was submitted that showed the duplexes.
Get close to the microphone, please, Brian. Sorry.
Before you do that, will you stipulate his credentials?
Yes, fine.
So it shows the 2 proposed duplexes, the Benson and the Shul. A2 is the tax map that was prepared initially, and it just shows in orange where the subject property is. A3 is the revised map that was submitted, and what we did is we reduced the size of the Best-In building. We also reduced the size of their what's being used for parking, the sanctuary room, and that enlarged the area of the duplex lot to the east of that. And A4 is a copy of the tax map where I've added the zone lines, and I've also highlighted in blue where there's other lots similar in size with the duplexes that are being proposed. The duplex that's being proposed, which is in the R75 zone, is pretty close to the size of the lot that's required. The duplex that's being proposed in the R10 zone, because this property is in a split zone, has now been increased to over 11,000 square feet, and I'll hit that in the testimony. I think the big issue is the parking. And just as an overview, then I'll go through the numbers. There's 2 sides to parking, and everybody wants to be sure, first of all, that the parking works. From a practical standpoint, the parking works. And then there's the parking that's required for the ordinance. The RVE report indicates the parking requirement, but they didn't take into consideration the changes that were made to both the Shul and the Bezden. The Shul was 2,000 and change square feet, so RVE calculated that as 2,000 times 1.25 and came up with how many parking spaces are required. That sanctuary was reduced, so it was under 2,000 square feet. So then it's 19 times 1. So there was 19 now required for the Shul. The sanctuary for the Bezden was decreased because we made the building smaller, so we could make the duplex larger. And that now needs 14 spaces, so we need a total of 33. We provided 24. What we have is a lease for the property across the street where the trailers are now, where we can fit more than 10. And what we're proposing is that there would be a condition in the resolution that they need to provide during resolution compliance documentation to prove that they have an additional 10 off-site parking spaces, which are permitted by the ordinance, so that we would be meeting the ordinance requirement for the parking. So to balance the 2 sides, A is we have to meet the ordinance requirement, The ordinance requirement is 34. We're going to be providing a total of 34, 24 on-site, on the combined site, and 10 off-site.
Mr. Flannery, are you providing for parking for the two duplexes?
Yes, the duplexes have their own parking and they comply. All of the duplexes have their own parking on site and comply.
At the end of the day, are there going to be 4 lots? The shul, the court, and the 2 different duplexes?
There'll be 6 lots, 4 zero lot line lots for the 2 duplexes, and one lot for the bedstand and 1 lot for the shul.
So in addition to the spaces that you just talked about, there's going to be 8 more spaces?
16 spaces, 4 for each of the single family.
Now, getting back, if I could, Mr. Chairman, getting back to my discussion with Mr. Penzer, how are we going to be assured that if you have an off-street parking across the street to provide 10 parking spaces, that it will always be 10 parking spaces and it won't be sold in the future for something else?
Well, we would, during resolution compliance, provide documentation to your engineer to show that that's available.
I understand that. But don't we need a deed restriction to ensure that 20 years from now, it's still a 10-lot parking space?
Well,
or 10 parking.
The deed restrictions only open up to the public the availability to enforce them. The township, if it's in the resolution, has the ability to enforce them. And when you're talking about a shul and a bedstand, I doubt that anybody from the public is going to pursue that kind of thing. So, in my opinion, you're not really adding any level of comfort. I think the level of comfort is in that this is a world-class bedstand and an existing neighborhood shul, and it's the last development in this area. This is an infill development. So it's not something that the character of the neighborhood is going to change. We have Forest Park across the street. We have the whole thing. So
who owns the park? Who will own that parking lot?
The parking lot is going to be owned. The property lines are shown on the plans, and there'll be cross-access easements, which again will be submitted to the board.
I think his question was who owns it? Is it a separate owner or a same owner?
Oh, the lot across the street where the
Yeah.
trailers are? There's another owner.
So there'll be 3 owners on this whole project?
They're tenants. They're tenants.
Yes, they're
Tenants. The shul is going to be a tenant of the lot across the street, which will provide parking.
which they are right now.
And how long is that lease going to be for?
Well, we would provide documentation during the resolution compliance that for at least 30 years, there's the availability for 10 off-site parking spaces in conformance with the ordinance requirements.
Well, why not make it an easement?
Right, who owns the duplex land?
The duplexes will be sold to individual owners.
Who owns it now?
The property is all owned by one owner, and there's a contract purchaser. I'm not familiar with who the contract purchaser is, but the contract purchaser, they're together, and they're going to split it up after they get the approval and buy it from the current owner.
Let me try again. There's going to be 3, forget the duplexes for a moment.
Okay.
There's going to be 3 tax lots, the shul, the court building, and the parking lot across the street.
Yes.
How many owners of those 3 lots?
3.
3 different owners.
3 different owners.
Well, how are we going to be assured that the 3rd owner who owns the parking lot, it will always keep it as a parking lot?
Because there'll be a resolution condition that the applicant is required to have 10 off-site parking spaces, and if...
Didn't you just restrict it to 30 years?
But
Didn't you just say 30 years?
I use 30 years because most times when we talk about this, people want to hear 30 years. Obviously, the shul, it's in their best interest, and they're really the ones that this is unique to. And I know the board hears, the planning board hears, they hear neighborhood shuls, and I don't know...
But the owner of the lot on the shul, for the shul, isn't the owner of the lot of the parking lot.
Right, and they'll have to provide a lease or an easement or some documentation to the satisfaction of the board engineer that parking is going to be there for that period of time.
Well, I think it's more than the satisfaction of the engineer, the satisfaction of the board. And it should be an easement, not a lease. A lease runs out, Brian. No, an easement on the, if we're relying on the 10 stalls across the street, is that true?
Well, the 10 stalls, and they wouldn't necessarily have to be across the street, because the ordinance provides that you can have off-site parking. There would
Would
be
you
a
agree
resolution
that this is
condition.
probably the most trafficked intersection of Lakewood? I mean, this is not a great place to have 10 parking stalls on the street. That's a really
No,
nice
I'm not
section.
talking about on the street, off-site, so they're not on our site. Off-site would be, and
On
they
your
lie across
property?
the street.
Where are they gonna be?
No, it wouldn't be on our property, because then it would be on-site. It would be on the property across the street, or it would be on another property in the immediate vicinity.
So if this resolution is going to go forever, the lease
Yes.
does not go forever. So you have to have the two lined
Well,
up. So it would have to be, let me finish, there would have to be a parking easement that would benefit the owners of this property.
The condition goes forever. So it's the operators of the shul who have the responsibility to make sure that they have 10 parking spaces forever.
And what happens if they don't?
That situation when we
And what happens if they don't? What happens if they don't?
What happens if they don't is they have to come back to this board, and they might have to restrict. You've already heard them indicate that this is predominantly a Shabbos shul, and it's a neighborhood shul, and they gave you the list of the people that are congregants that live in this area and are going to stay in this area.
No, you can't do that, you can't do that. You have represented that this person, I thought it was across the street down by me, we don't know where. You represented that, testified that there's gonna be 10 parking spaces, that's how you get to what's required.
Yes.
And you said they're gonna be across the street.
Yes.
Now they may not be across the street, they may be in some undefined, unknown place, maybe.
But it will be defined before we get resolution.
No, that's not satisfactory. You're here to get site plan approval. So I think it's appropriate for the zoning board to know, since you need a parking space, you have a parking space issue, where they're gonna park with
Well-
specificity.
And my testimony is that it would be across the street. That's what they have a lease on the property across the street, and we would provide that as part of resolution compliance.
Do you have it here?
Right?
It's kind of a really
My
important
question
piece
is,
of the puzzle.
if I could, Brian, is the owner of the third property here? So
No.
we can hear? Oh, that person's not here. So we can't hear from the horse's mouth this whole situation as far
Well,
as.
if the applicant has
And we don't have a lease.
if the applicant has a 30-year lease, you don't have to hear from the property.
Have you seen the lease?
No,
I would
I have
prefer
not
you-
seen.
Well, then how do you know there's a 30-year lease? How do you know that?
Well, the applicant has represented to me, and I found them to be credible people that I believe.
And who's the tenant of that lease?
We have two separate tax lots and two separate legal entities.
The lease is to the shul, which is one of the property owners, the ultimate property owners here.
We have nothing tangible right now that this board can look at. And the owner of that particular property is not here to testify before us that he's agreed to this statement.
Mr. Penzer, shouldn't the owner of that parking lot area be one of the applicants? Well, he's presumably, for the sake of this application, quote, giving up his property.
The ordinance was amended, you can have parking on your lot without it, as not being separate, as a separate use. It doesn't have to be.
I don't understand what you're
The
saying.
applicant did request the parking variance, and we know this for a parking variance. The applicant has entered into this lease that I haven't seen, that we're representing we would provide, so that we can tell you, A, we meet the number of parking spaces stipulated by the ordinance. The second part of it is the number of parking spaces that are needed. And that was the point of the testimony earlier. We have
No,
two
that
uses.
doesn't work, because either you're saying, well, we'll have enough parking spaces, therefore we don't need a variance. But how are we assured about that? There's no proof about this parking
Well,
lot.
proof needs to be provided before the map gets signed.
No, I think it has to be provided. before
Okay,
that.
let's move on.
Mr. Chairman, can I just remind you of one thing? Years ago, we approved the Becerra on 4th Street on Madison, not enough parking, and we agreed parking to be across the road in the hotel, the guy went bankrupt, and the bank took away the hotel. Bingo, the parking lot was lost for Wall Street, and then we had the fiasco with all the stores on Clifton going crazy, not enough parking for the base road.
And counsel, would you?
Why should the same
bankruptcy-
scenario happen again? This guy could, whatever, go bankrupt, the bank will take over the property's gone, and there's not enough parking.
And counsel, would you agree that a lease is an executory contract that'll be voidable in bankruptcy?
Oh, sure it is.
Yeah.
That's why it seems to me that unless the property, and we're starting to speculate because we don't have enough here, frankly. It seems to me, unless the parking lot is owned by either the owner of the shul or the court to get around what Mr. Gelli was just suggesting.
Or you have an easement, you have a parking easement that runs with the land.
That's not even enough because, because let's say, just as an example, let's say the guy who owns the parking lot has given an easement to the shul.
Yes.
Right? 10 years from now, he gives the shul money to revoke the easement. He can do that.
Aha.
Right? And now all of a sudden we have a 3-story building on the parking lot.
Aha.
Aha.
So it sounds like the board isn't comfortable with the off-site parking. So then I think we would need to proceed with our application, asking for the variance and justifying why the variance makes sense. Why we have a situation that the shul has more than enough parking that's actually needed, and the Bezdin, when you look at the 24 spaces that are there, and the fact that they're at 2 different times, it's shared parking, and it's a similar concept to when you have a shopping center. If you have one building in a shopping center, you need 1 space per 200. When you do a shopping center because there's shared uses, you need less parking. So we're going to have conditions in the approval that'll be a resolution condition that'll say the shul is closed when the Bezdin is open. So there's 24 parking spaces available for the shul when that's open, and there's 24 parking spaces available for the Bezdin when that's open, both of which comply with the ordinance requirement for the individual use. But when you look at it in total, we need a variance. So we're going to request that variance and give the justification for that variance. The applicant is going to proceed with his lease, which the board isn't comfortable with, so that there will be more parking in the neighborhood. But we're going to make our case based on the fact that it's a shared use of a parking lot. There's cross-access easements which will be reviewed by your professionals after if the board acts favorably.
Brian,
Brian, the parking calculations you have, do you need strictly for the preventative court room? You don't need for any offices?
Well, your engineer reviewed it, and there's no parking requirements for rabbinical court because it's a very specific use. Your engineer reviewed it, and I agree with him that you would take the main sanctuary room the same as you would for a shul, and say 1 space per 100 square feet.
In this particular case, Rabbi Grossman has said that there's a purpose for the other rooms. So when you have a shul, so we're using the sanctuary as a basis to determine how much parking there is. And I get it with the shul use and all that. But when you're talking about the Bezdin, they're kind of like having it both ways. They want to use the sanctuary as a basis for how much parking they need and not take into consideration the usage of the rooms, which they're saying that they need.
Because it's the same people.
Brian, can I just make a suggestion? Parking is a problem. If you get rid of these duplex behind here, move the building back, and have ample parking.
Well, the flip side to that is if we put additional parking there, it's going to attract more people to the area.
You'll have your 34 spots.
It'll be totally conforming.
And that's what you want, because you want.
Brian, you can't say that your non-conformance is an advantage. You can't be saying that.
No,
you can't be saying that.
What I am saying is that both applicants feel this. So the applicants feel that the parking that's there is sufficient, and the duplexes that are being done are something that's helping to finance and contribute to it, and contribute to the well-being of the neighborhood. I mean, to just knock off a duplex, if it's not your duplex, is an easy thing to do. It's not my duplex, so it would be an easy thing to do, but for these applicants that have come together for this particularly situated lot, to make it work.
Brian, if it's your testimony, you need that duplex to be able to make it all affordable. You haven't even bought it yet, so go back to the seller and renegotiate the deal. Because having 4 spots in that building, if this building is 9,000 square feet, right?
You're talking about the shul or
the base of that?
It's
with the basement, it's about 9,000.
Okay.
And the shul's about the same size.
Similar in size, yes.
So you got a lot of coverage there, and you don't have enough parking, and you didn't buy the land yet, so take away the duplex. You'll be able to renegotiate the purchase price of the land. The people who made the testimony, Rabbi William, Rabbi Wilner, Rabbi Nussbaum, did an unbelievable job. Beautiful shul, beautiful base of that, but it doesn't work with the duplex. In my view, it just doesn't fit. It's like fitting
I'm not sure if there's an availability to renegotiate with the owner.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say keep one duplex and one single house. Would you still need a parking variance, according to Terry's report or Dave's report?
Yes.
One duplex and one single. Would you be able to get enough parking?
I think if we did one duplex and one single, we could probably squeeze in, even if we stacked or something, to 10 additional spaces.
It's the same footprint.
Yes.
Well,
It's the
if
same
you were to do it, Mr. Herzl suggested you would have more parking spaces available, is that what you're saying?
That's correct. We would eliminate the duplex, which
Right.
is 2 units. We would replace it with just 1 unit.
Right.
And then the remaining lot would be added to the Besdet lot, and we would add 10 additional parking spaces.
You'd have 10 more spaces because it goes from a duplex to a single family?
Yes. There's already 4 spaces on that lot, and
Right.
a duplex. So we're gonna put 4 spaces, no duplex, and 6 additional spaces.
Brian, what's the footprint of a single-family house versus a duplex?
Roughly the same.
That's the same, so I'm not sure how you get all those additional parking spaces.
Yeah, the same as half of it. We're taking half of the duplex away.
How big would that lot be?
Well, no, it doesn't.
Hey, Brian, we can't change the plans now in midstream and expect us to see what's going on. So please continue with the testimony of the plans that we have in front of us.
Well, I think if we're at a point where the board feels the application is submitted doesn't make sense, and changing it to a single would make sense, the applicant would need to revise his plans.
Well,
There's no sense.
let me stop in half sentence. I think the board is indicating what's proposed doesn't make sense. They didn't necessarily say a single family would make sense. So,
Well, they
and
said-
here's the problem. We have, and it's a practical problem, Mr. Fenzer. We had 3 planning board members here that are graciously here. They ain't getting paid overtime. I mean, they're here, voluntarily. And now we're suggesting they have to go back another,
Can I have 1 minute, please?
Sure.
Mr. Penzer, can I just say one thing?
We
Mr.
sorry.
Brian, would you have a problem by opening to the public?
No, but my answer to you is I think what you said is very fair. So we will take responsibility. If we do the plan that was submitted, we will guarantee 10 parking spaces, that there will be no variance. That's our responsibility, our headache, our risk. We'll take the risk.
That's with a double, two duplexes or with a single?
A single.
A single.
We will take that responsibility.
Could it be done subject to?
Subject to, prior to the resolution, you'll see it.
I don't think that's the way to do it. I really don't. I don't think it'd be a difficult.
I'd like to change, Mr. Penzer, you know me very well.
I understand, but.
And you know that I like to vote only on what I see in front of me. This application has been here a while, going back and forth, and we're trying to accommodate exactly what we're looking for. I'm gonna give you my opinion, okay? This application to me is very dense. This corner in the area is very dense. You not only have regular traffic going through that area, but you also have a lot of truck traffic that goes through that area, going into the industrial park, going into the other areas that are feeding into Lakewood, in and out of Lakewood, okay? You're putting two huge buildings here that, though you say are not going to be busy, I have a synagogue that now is in my neighborhood, and it's always busy, which is why I was asking, is somebody gonna be there during the daytime, because the synagogue's never empty. Okay, there's always somebody there, which I don't have a problem with. Okay, I understand that, okay? So, I'm looking at, I live in Lakewood for over 30 years. I drive in Lakewood all the time. I see the synagogues, and they're always busy. I see the schools, and they're always busy. Morning, noon, and night, okay? I don't know too much about court, but if you look at this room, it's busy, okay, across the board. All right, so I'm assuming that now you have a courtroom where you have 3 judges that are looking at TVs, so there's always constant transactions. Now, you're talking about business, knowing the community the way it is, there's always business transactions taking place every day, every minute of the day. Let me finish, it's not a time. So now I have these 2 huge buildings with no parking, expecting people to park into the street or to somebody else's property for whatever reason, because you're going to guarantee that's going to happen, okay? And now I have other people that live in the area that also have family that come and visit and everything else, also parking, not only in the street, but in the area. That corner, the light was changed, and the entrance was changed, so people could turn because it gets so backed up all the way to Washington, all the way up to Pine, because there's no room for people to go, so they finally decided to make it a 3-lane street, where now the right turn can be made on red, as well as not on red, and people would have space. So I have a huge problem with adding the housing and the courthouse and the shul. I don't have a problem with it. Because if you get rid of those 2 duplexes, the housing itself, and put those 2 buildings, mazel tov. I think it would be great. Okay? But what I'm seeing here makes no sense.
Okay, so
My opinion.
I agree, but let me respond. I'm the guy who's negotiated with the seller. Mr. Gelli had a very valid point, except he doesn't know one thing. He said, now that you're not getting the duplex, you'll be able to negotiate the price. The reason why the price is non-negotiable is he can get, as a matter of right, without any variances, and he has the plan, 9 duplexes. So if you think it's dense now, 9 duplexes without any variances, 0 lot line is what he can get. And that's what he factored in the cost to us. That's why he said, I'm not selling to 2 people. He was the most independent guy. It took us over a year to beg him to explain we need to have the synagogue in the area. So I appreciate everything you said, but it's not going to get better. So the question you, as someone in the zoning, should ask with all your experiences, what would I rather have?
A shul and the courthouse.
So what?
And it would be great.
But so I'm saying to you is, we also respect the fact that these wonderful people came to the planning board, that they went here. So what we're saying is, we will take responsibility. It's going to be almost the same footprint. It's going to be reduced from a duplex to a single, and we will get the parking done to the subject, to your engineer. If he says no, then we lost it. But we're willing to satisfy and take that risk.
Variance-free, because they feel comfortable with.
Variance-free. That's our responsibility.
Are you talking 18 the chairs?
Yes.
One person at a time. Sorry.
Through the chair. Brian, I'm coming late to this, but the rabbinic court on Route 9, I think it's 4th Street. You've got the synagogue here. I think you have the basement on top, and you've got your synagog hall in the basement. I don't know the politics, but I'm looking at the stupid map. Put the one on top of the other, do a condominium, have one lot, and you have a big mama shared thing, and you get all your duplexes. Everybody's happy. Am I missing something?
Yeah.
Huh?
Height variance.
Can we give a height variance?
Sure you can.
So why don't we give you a height variance to have, I think we'd rather have a big tall building than one that has inadequate parking. I'm not as open.
The problem is that, as a practical matter, the uses are so diverse. That's why I prefaced my remarks, saying that if I was a and the one over here, that the one on 4th Street is more, there's rentals in this tool as well. I have to do another application.
Does that application work? I mean, does that function work?
It won't work here.
Okay, I'm looking at the map.
I don't believe it would work. But all I'm saying respectfully is, I don't think it's that complex. I think that you can maintain it and still have all the things with it. We can deliver it variance-free by making that. And if we don't, then you know what, shame on us. We're not gonna come back to the variance. If you're finding up with variance, saying that it has to be variance-free, no variance whatsoever, we'll take responsibility. We'll be boards.
Okay,
I have to tell you that this seller has been so difficult because, listen to this, everything you said is true, and I'm not disputing it. 9 duplexes, 18 houses, hides labor.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Spencer. At this point, I'm going to open up to the public.
Brian, let me ask you 2 points. Was a traffic study done on Martin Luther King and Pine?
No, it was not done.
Because, and it should be done, because the state is going to redo Route 9 and Pine Street. It's going to be a big area to increase the flow. And also the county is going to redo part of Pine Street to increase the flow. There's no traffic light on Pine and by MLK.
Oh, there is a traffic.
There's traffic light.
And they already did. The county already widened. That's what I'm saying. The county already widened.
They're going to do more work.
You know.
The county did on MLK. Part of our application here was to widen the radius at this intersection, which would be a benefit, and provide drainage. Anybody that knows this area, there's a flooding problem here, so we're going to provide drainage that would benefit the neighbor and widen that radius so that you can when you make those right turns, the smaller vehicles, no problem. The larger vehicles have a problem. This would correct that. But,
Chair. Thank you. All right.
Dave, one other question. Dave, do you agree with Mr. Flannery regarding the parking calculations? Because he's reducing it according to your report.
Say the question again, thank you.
Do you agree with the parking calculations?
I'm not sure I understand what parking calculations am I agreeing with.
Why did you testify? How much you need total?
The sanctuary, the main sanctuary for the shul will be 1,900 square feet. So that requires 19 parking spaces.
Correct.
Instead of it was 2,000 and something, so it bumped up to the 1.25. And then the sanctuary for the Besden will be 1,400 square feet, so that requires another 14 parking spaces, 1 per 100 square feet.
Yes, I agree with those numbers.
So what would be the total parking that you need?
33.
33.
There's some fractions in there that brings it to 34.
Okay, so assuming we eliminate one
Yeah, the
house,
one house is 5,000 square feet. On 5,000 square feet, we
you
can
could
fit 10
fit
parking
the
spaces.
34 parking spaces.
Well, the additional 10 to make 34 parking spaces.
Okay. I'd like to open up to the public right now. Anybody from the public wants to be heard on appeal number 4124, please come forward. I'm giving 4 minutes and only 4 minutes for questioning.
Sir, would you
And
raise your right?
direct your questions only to the board.
Do you affirm to tell the whole truth?
I affirm.
Could you give us your full name and spell your last?
Yeah, Moshe Zionist, Z-E-I-N-S, 112 Elmhurst Boulevard, Lakewood, New Jersey, 08701. One question and one comment for the board. If the applicant were to go through with this thing of cutting the duplex to a single and all that, does that mean that the parking lot across the road, does that go away, and we just have the parking here?
Right now, the application only involves this site. It
across the road.
it doesn't include now any potential off-street parking.
Okay, thank you. And my comment is that I heard something about that there could be 9 duplexes by right with the parking for the duplexes. My comment is I would rather have that. I would rather have the 9 duplexes than this. The reason is because I understand that the president only has the 25 people who are there max, and there's not going to be any more. But the shul has no max. Last time, Mr. Herzl approved the shul on James Street by Sunset Road. Rabbi Notice was here, and he swore up and down that there's, quote, less than 20 members of the shul now. Once the beautiful building went up, check things out over there. Shul became a hot spot, and people come. I love shuls. I happen to go to a couple myself. I'm a member of 3 shuls, so no one should think it's mine, right? I'm just saying it again, the shul, there's no max to it. What happens if more people come with cars? They haven't said anything how to stop them. Have they agreed to lock the doors after the parking lot is full? You know?
Okay, thank you.
They want 9 duplexes, let the owner come back with that. That's my thing. Thank you.
Anyone else want to be heard on appeal number 4124? Please step forward.
Sir, would you raise your right hand? Do you affirm? Sir, over here. No. Would you raise your right hand? Do you affirm to tell the whole truth?
Yes.
Could you give us your full name and spell your last?
Jeffrey Hawkwood, Hoffberg. 511 Martin Luther. I live right that's Martin Luther. I live right here.
Please use the microphone, Mr. Hoffer, please.
I live 2 doors down. I have a daughter with Down syndrome. And when they said that people were going to be coming from all over the world, it really got me very nervous because my daughter will go with anybody. And people coming from all over the world, the synagogue I'm a member of, and I have no issue with the synagogue at all, and the synagogue should stay a synagogue, and there has to be a way to work it around just having a synagogue. This is a courthouse that should not be in a residential area. No matter what the situation is, I don't know. Parking, not parking, I bought my house there, most of my assets are in my house. Why should I, who bought a house there, now have to have a courthouse down the block with people coming from all over the world with my special needs child at danger? Because when people come to a courthouse, they're coming for a specific reason, means that they're having issues. Why they're coming to a courthouse. So my daughter who plays in the yard, who we try to watch our best, but have some coop coming from somewhere because he's having a fight with his wife.
I think the testimony was, just so you understand, the testimony in terms of worldwide is that they wouldn't be physically coming to the court. It would be done by Skype and teleconferencing. And there might be people there, but they're not coming from, but that was their testimony.
I've been to that courthouse before. I had one issue. I bought a truck that was there. People physically come to that courthouse.
Oh, yeah, they're going to come, but the testimony was that they're not coming from Australia, or they're not coming from.
They have the right to come, correct? Well, they may come from New York, they may come from Philadelphia, and the parking is a major issue. There's no parking there. I really can park in my own driveway. I can really get in and out. If this situation is built, I'm not even going to be able to have a guest. Because where are they going to go? Where are they going to park? You can't limit the street because then nobody can come visit me. And to the man over there, he was correct. Houses will be better. I think a synagogue of duplexes will be the best way to go. There has to be a way around it. I think maybe add 1 or 2 more duplexes or 3 to fund the synagogue. I don't feel that this court should be in my neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
My personal opinion.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public would like to be heard on appeal number 4124? Seeing none, I close it to the public. Mr. Penzer. Any other questions from board members?
Yeah, Mr. Flannery. I just have a question. Assuming that you will eliminate half of the duplex, the entrance on Pine Street, I think, is a little too close to Dr. Martin Luther King. Would that be shifted over? I mean, how many feet is it right now? The entrance to the courthouse.
The entrance to the courthouse is about 30 feet right now. We do have a plan to slide that over. It wasn't submitted in time, but we can certainly double the separation from the, and I have a rendering there that shows that, but it doesn't show after the duplex gone, it just shows moving the driveway over to get further distance from the.
What's your testimony? How far would it be from Dr. Martin?
60 feet.
What?
At a minimum.
Brian, just, again, playing novice architect, but couldn't you take the two townhouses, rotate them 90 degrees, slide it all the way down? So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 townhouses, bring the actually take the base in, move it. Can you have the two buildings side by side? So you don't want to be on top of each other, you don't like each other that much. But could you be side by side, physically join the buildings, then have one big mama parking lot in front?
You gotta use your mic.
I talk really loud. Take these two.
It's not being recorded, though.
Not being recorded.
Just put these buildings together, back to back, you have to redesign it.
Mr. Stern, they're not hearing you on the mic.
Huh?
You really need to talk about
Okay,
it.
well, I can't.
Right.
Take that mic.
Hold on.
Take these two, rotate 90 degrees, put them on, so you have the 4 townhouses. Slide these buildings down, I don't know if you can do this, make it almost one building. Hold the whole thing back, there's one big parking lot here. I don't know if it'll work, but it just seems like you got all these extra space, you know, it's space.
And I know the neighbor on Pine Street indicated he wanted a house next to him, so they met with the neighbors to see what the neighbors were okay with. And this neighbor on Pine Street wanted a house next to him.
Just trying to be helpful, Brian.
Yes, and I appreciate it. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to fit two inherently beneficial uses on the property. And yes.
Brian, could you just show us, if you get rid of half the duplex, where would you put the parking? I'd like to be contiguous.
Well, the parking would be contiguous. We would leave this neighbor the single house next to him, and then we would have parking on the 5,000 square foot lot.
And that driveway will be shifted over to where the duplex is right now.
Yes, correct.
Why are we talking about taking away one? Are we not doing this application?
There was conversation about.
I understand that, but right now, this is the application, two duplex.
Well, certainly the applicant would prefer if he can get an approval on the plan as submitted. But if the board.
We can't redesign the whole thing now, because we don't know, we can't figure out moving it back, moving entrances 60 feet instead of 30 feet. Right now, I see 3 entrances where till now there was only one. There is one small house, there's one little entrance for the small house. Now there's two entrances for 8 cars each, 4 cars each. And then in another entrance, 30 feet away, you say you're going to move that, move this. I can't picture it, so the application is the application which is before us.
Well, we do have a plan that shows the entrance, but it also shows
Mr. Flanagan, I agree with my colleague. Let's discuss what we have in front of us.
Okay.
Let's just move it further. So, Mr. Penzer, do you have any closing arguments?
I have a question. I have a question. If you're proposing to have no request for any variances, then what's left of the application?
The only variances, the
The representation is there would be no parking variance. We're still before the board because the lot area.
I just heard no variance.
Oh, okay. Well,
Okay, is that your application, Mr. Spencer?
The only thing I will say to you is that there is a provision for inherently beneficial use. Our offer is that both these uses are very inherently beneficial. They're both different. The shul is unique, that it's been there for a few years in the area, knows it and knows the niche where it can supply. And it is inherently beneficial because during the times when it will be operational, nothing else will be operational. And as far as the rabbinical court, it's one of a kind. There's nothing like it, I don't know, anywhere in the United States. It's certainly not related. So therefore, it does qualify as an inherently beneficial use. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, okay, board members, you've heard the application, you've heard what their situation is. Can I get a vote on the application, please?
I will comment the way it's presented. If we could vote on making it a single, I would make that motion. That motion be accepted.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hurley, get a little closer. I heard you
Could
say.
the motion be accepted, making one duplex and one single?
We would agree, the applicant would agree.
Well,
I'm asking their attorney.
they have a right, it seems to me, to make a modification during the purpose of during the application process to meet questions and concerns of the board. By the same token, the board has a right to see them before you vote on it. So that's something you have to decide. If you're comfortable enough with the suggestion that it's one duplex of one house, without seeing it in writing, so to speak, or on a plan, if you're comfortable enough, you can make that motion.
Okay.
Just a comment to you. It sounds like you are inclined towards making a motion, provided that it would be one single instead of a duplex. The risk of that, in my view, is that I think that if the board members are going to vote with what they see in front of them, and it's hard for them to contemplate what it would look like the way you're promoting motion, and it gets denied, they may not be able to come back because what they really want is something that's going to be approved. And it sounds from what I'm hearing from them is that they would be amenable to making it with a single family house. And I think that we should see that.
Then they have to pull the application.
Sorry?
They have to pull the application. Go for vote.
The applicant would carry the application and come back.
Just speak to the chairman.
I think we should vote.
We're really backed up, so which is why this is a special meeting, which is why we did it, because we have a lot of applications going forward. So, if the applicant wanted to do changes or anything else, that should have been brought beforehand and not at this time.
Well, we mentioned it when we first heard the.
No, Mr. Planner, there are 7 applications on tonight, and it's a special night. This application's taking 2 hours, and now there's a curveball.
Well, the practical matter is if you deny it, somebody's going to come back on this property anyway, so you didn't save any time by denying. If you carry it, it's the same amount of time as denying and coming back. All you've done is the applicant has to incur more administrative fees.
Well, when you say carrying, you're talking about carrying this application or taking it back to tonight and coming back with a new application or a modified application?
Coming back with a modified application, changing from 2 duplexes to 1 duplex and 1 single.
That'd be variance-free on parking.
Variance-free on parking.
But we still had the problem with the variance on the street parking. Versus street parking.
Well, no, the testimony from Mr. Flannery is that if you lose one of the duplexes and make it a single-family house instead, he can fit all of the other parking spaces. He can get up to 34 parking spaces.
Yes, and that's why we're asking to carry it, to show that.
I would like to make a comment also. I don't think it's any way possible to enforce any of those restrictions that we spoke about before. It's a joke. Those synagogues will be able to close its doors at 9 o'clock. I'm the biggest fan of those many synagogues in town, nothing to talk about. And I'll build as much as I can. Personally, I'm here on this board. And I'd like as many places back as possible. This is just squeezing in a huge court into a tiny shoe, and it doesn't really fit, and they're now going to try and make it fit and come back with one taking away, make one duplex. There's still 3 entrances on a very busy Pine Street. Pine Street people race down to make that right to Martin Luther King. Now there's a turning lane, people will be coming out, backing in. There's 4 cars on each of these here, then you take one away, but it's going to be, it's too much, and it's talking about 18,000 square feet of building. 2 buildings of 9,000 square feet. I love it. It's fantastic. The shoe is unbelievable. It should be there. And the base of that, but the duplexes are squeezing in is just too much. At this point, maybe they're right. 9 duplexes.
Can I get a vote on this application, please? Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion that we deny this application.
The motion is to deny the application. Can I get a second on the motion, please?
Second.
By Hop, and second by Mr. Garfield. Roll call, please.
The yes is yes.
Yes means it is denied.
Go ahead, a second.
Where is it?
Mr. Gelli.
Yes.
Mr. Halverson.
Yes.
Mr. Vivian.
Yes.
Mr. Stern.
Yes.
Mr. Herzl.
Yes.
Mr. Garfield.
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes. Thank you. The motion denied.
The motion is approved.
I mean, no, the motion to
The application is denied.
Thank you.
I go to a bathroom, go sit around.
So I said, that's why there's no parking lot. I said, you know, are you a dip? Are you a dip? Like, I didn't know about
With a couple of Okay. I want to continue with tonight's meeting. I just want to keep in mind that now we have regular board members, Moish Rankers here, and Moish Shipberg. I just want to recognize them that they will be voting on the other applications. 6 members. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Michael J. Rose, here down in Hollis, Isla, for this next application on behalf of Cummings.
4127?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Gross, I want to take 2 minutes from your time, okay? I'd like to take this application, third if I can. I have somebody that traveled from Virginia that's here, that I'd like to get that application out of the way. It's a small application,
okay. So
I'd like to do with your permission. Thank you. I'm looking at appeal number 4135, 1434 Holdings LLC. Is Mr. Pfeffer here? Mr. Pfeffer, please come up.
My engineer is a whole.
Just to explain to the public, I'm taking this application out of turn because we have a gentleman that was here last month that came from Virginia, and he came again this month, and he's from Virginia. He's got a 6-hour ride. It's a short application, and we just want to get it out of the way. Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking for Brian. He stepped out. I'm looking for him.
We got 2 minutes. If not, I'm going to take that application.
You can take, yeah, I'm here at home. Didn't know this was coming.
Adam. Okay, I'm just. We're looking at appeal number 4135, 1434 Holdings LLC.
1434 14th Street, lot 24.02, lot 18, R12 zone. Variance requested for rear yard setback for a proposed deck, required 20 feet, proposed 5 feet.
We have one of my members step down, Mayor Gallo. So we have 6 members. Mr. Pepper.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm Pepper on behalf of the applicant. The application this evening is for a rear deck on the house. For a deck on the rear deck of the house, these 20 feet is required. We're asking for 5 feet for the setback. I will swear in Mr. Flannery in a minute if I can. We'll also go to mark our exhibits. I'll wait for Mr. Flannery to finish. I'll ask Jerry if he can to swear in Mr. Flannery.
Mr. Flannery, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth?
I do. Brian Flannery, Jackson, New Jersey, licensed professional engineer and professional planner. This application is indicated is for a deck in the rear yard setback. It's a corner property. I have 3 exhibits marked. A1 is a copy of the variance map. A2 is a copy of an aerial showing the subject property, which has frontage on 14th Street and Cedar Road. And A3 is a copy of the tax map showing the same thing. The applicant is building this house, and the first thing that pops out for everybody, while there's a deck there already, this wing of the house is for the applicant's parents. What was envisioned at this entrance was a raised deck, which is permissible. Raised deck is not a structure, so you build it on grade. What that does, though, is it creates drainage problems. A raised patio. The raised patios on grade, it creates more of a drainage issue, and it's not as convenient for the users. So the parents would be using this. What I'd like to point out is that this, if you call the front of the house Cedar Road, would only need 10 feet. So it sounds like a lot. 5, we're 20, and the reason 5 is picked is because when they were going to do the raised patio, that's the raised patio that they're going to put in. The decks that are now required to meet the setbacks for the principal building, up until 2 years ago, it wasn't that way. Up until 2 years ago, the decks were not considered part of the setback, and this would have been built without any problem. What happened is there were instances where people would build their decks right to the property line, and then there was no access to the interior parts of the lot, and the township committee said that that's a potential problem, and they just did a knee-jerk reaction and pulled it all back. The 5 feet that's proposed provides sufficient access to the rear of the unit. There's also access to the rear of the unit from the other side, where the deck is that the owner of the house will be living in. And this just provides a nice area for his parents. When you drive down Cedar Road, the house next door to this is only 50 feet wide. Some of the houses are smaller. When you drive down 14th Street, all the houses are large. And if this situation was on 14th Street, it might seem out of place. On Cedar Road, it's my opinion that it's not going to have any aesthetic impact. It doesn't have any practical impact because you can walk past and get there, and you can virtually have the same thing with a raised patio instead of deck. So if we look at the report, it's pretty simple in nature. It indicates that it calls it out as a side setback, which is, if you looked at it, you might think it was a side setback, but it's a rear setback. It does call out the required 20 feet is required, which is consistent with a rear setback rather than the side. The side would only be 10. And it indicates that testimony should be provided on justification for the variance. So if you look at the master plan 2017 on page 7, it says encourage development and redevelopment based on smart growth planning principles. And I think certainly providing a room in the house for an owner's parents and providing them a deck so they can enjoy their place of living is a good thing and meets that criteria. This is a C2 variance. And a C2 variance, we have to show the benefits outweigh the detriments. So if you look at the municipal land use law, NJAC 40:55D2, under the purpose of the Act, is to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands in the state in a manner which will promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. And it's my testimony that this does that because it provides for the general welfare of the owner without any noticeable impact on either the general public or the adjoining neighbors. The C2 variances, we need to show that it relates to a specific piece of property, and you have this property that's a corner lot on 14th and Cedar Road. I think is very specific. We're proposing a deck instead of a raised patio. So the uses are the same. The applicant certainly will provide a privacy fence along the property line, which will benefit both the adjoining neighbor and this neighbor, as well as any landscaping that the board would feel was needed as well. We have to show that the purposes of the municipal land use law would be advanced, and that's what I just read from NJAC 40:55D2. We have to show the benefits outweigh the detriments, and my testimony is that there's virtually no detriment because we can buffer the neighbor from the street. It's not going to look any different, and it would look identical to a raised patio. And the exception is that the drainage will work better and it'll be more functional for the occupants. The variance will not impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan zoning ordinance, and certainly a variance of this nature would not do that. And then we need to show that the variance could be granted without any substantial detriment to the public good. And I think my testimony covered that as well.
Brian, can you just explain to the board? Brian, can you kind of just explain to the board the difference between the raised patio versus the actual deck, and why this is? I just mean that the drainage is better. You kind of just explain so the board understands. Or we can build the same exact sort of.
Well, a raised patio would be built by sloping or providing tiered retaining walls that would bring the grade up to the same height, and then you'd have a patio, and it just rests right on grade. So now you have concrete or pavers or stone or something right on grade in the same area, the same as the deck, and you do that on the three sides. And as I indicated, the problem then is that the drainage, you like to have the drainage drain away from the house and then drain in two directions, toward the road and toward the rear yard. And once you put that raised patio in, then you have to put pipes underneath it, and you create a situation where there may be some ponding and some mosquitoes, and it just creates a situation that isn't helpful. And the owner of this house was going to do this, but he's a friend of mine, and when I came out to see his house and he said he's doing a raised patio here, I said you're much better off with the deck. My recommendation would be to make the application. The application is something that would not have even been needed 2 years ago before this knee-jerk reaction to changing the rules. And again, it's something we need to show that the benefits outweigh the detriment. And it's my testimony that there is no detriment, and the benefit from a drainage, from a usability purpose, it's greatly enhanced.
And your testimony, the raised patio does not require variance?
That is correct.
Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions from board members?
I have a question. How high is the deck and how high is the fence?
Well, the deck is going to come right out at door level, which is about 3 feet higher than the grade. The grade of the adjoining property to the south, there's an embankment that brings that up pretty high. So the deck that was coming out will be coming out pretty close to the same height as the neighbor's property. And we could put my testimony would be to put a 6-foot fence there, because I think a 6-foot fence looks good. If the board wanted, we would do an 8-foot fence, which is permitted by the ordinance, but I think the 8-foot fence makes it look like you're in an industrial area.
Okay.
And that 4-foot fence we would put all the way up to the front setback of the front setback line, because that's as far as you're allowed to do it. From the front setback line forward, we would do 4 feet.
Right, how big is the deck, proposed deck?
The proposed deck is
20 feet, I see the width.
Now, the 20 feet is the dimension from the house to the property line. We're looking for a deck that's 12 feet, because it's 12 feet wide. We have it 3 feet off the house because the bathroom window is right adjoining the deck, and they wanted to have some separation, and also the basement windows are there, so we wanted to have the 3-foot separation, so we're looking for a 12-foot deck.
So you have the...
Is it 12 foot square?
It's the house.
It's 12 foot by the width of the house, which is 30, it's less than the width of the house, so it's 12 by 30.
Okay, so you have so there's a little like walkway that I'm assuming is the door coming out of the house.
Yes.
And then there's a 3-foot separation, so somebody coming from the back of the house would have 3 feet between the house and the deck. That's what it would be.
Well,
because the windows, the bathroom, and the
yes.
facing windows.
Yes.
Okay. Now, just because I just want to understand this, the front of the house is 14th Street.
Yes.
So this is their rear yard.
Yes.
And which is somebody else's side yard. That's what's happening here.
Yes.
Okay.
There is a front, I believe there's another front door on Cedar.
Yes, there is there's an entrance door on Cedar. The front door is on 14th Street.
And this area is elderly parents. Is that what?
Yes, that's correct.
Correct.
So this is a separate house, mother-daughter house, or just rooms there, just
Room
available for them to go outside.
Rooms there, yeah, for them to share the house.
Any other questions by board members? Okay, seeing none, can I get anybody from the public that would like to be heard on application 4135, 1434 Holdings LLC? Please come forward.
Sir, are you going to testify?
Yes, sir.
Would you please raise your right hand when you're ready? Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
Would you give us your full name and spell your, and speak into the mic?
Okay. Stephen Kramer, Kramer.
Thank you.
I want to thank the panel and that secretary and chairman for letting me talk. We heard earlier that the house is still under construction and that there's quote me correctly, there was no detriment. My point is that there is detriment. That there is a detriment to my property, which is property directly adjacent to the backyard. The house has been in my family for about 75 years, so it predates ordinances. So the setback, even though it's an R12 on the side yard, is smaller than you might expect, and it's basically about 5 feet. So it's about half of the current thing is. Also, that particular side of the house is where the bedrooms are. It's a very small two-bedroom, one bed house. That side is where the bedrooms are, and there are windows to the bedrooms on that side. So that's why I'm very concerned about what's happening on the other side of the property line. They're asking for what I consider an extreme setback reduction of 75 feet, 75%, 40 from 20, which is extreme. So I'm concerned about the impact on the bedrooms and people who live in the house. There's a concern that when you have a deck that close, you can have noise, you can have light if it's at night, and you can't see from the pictures, but the way the windows are set, there's a very good chance light will come in. And also, I don't know whether the people in the house will like to barbecue, but if they do, there are issues of smoke and smell. And so that's a concern. There's been a long-term tenant in the house. He's been there about 30 years. Those of you who rent property know good tenants are like gold. So I want to make sure I keep him and his wife. It's an older couple.
Excuse me, Mr. Kramer, what is the address of the house that you have?
15 Cedar Road.
He owns lot 20,
Lot
next lot.
Okay, thank you.
So basically, that's what we're concerned about. The privacy issue, the noise, lights, smell, smoke, and just the general enjoyment of being in the house where you can go to sleep at night.
Mr. Kramer, you don't think that the privacy fence would take care of you or answer some of your concerns?
No. There isn't enough room on my property, and things like sound and light reflected off. It's a very tall house, and light reflected off off the side of the house will go into the bedroom, even if the spotlights are not directly pointed that way.
Did you say that?
And of course, smoke and smell. The fence doesn't really do much for that.
Did you say that? Did you just say again how close your home that you own is to the property line to your property line?
Okay, the side lot is approximately 5 feet.
So you're 5 feet from his property line?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, it's an existing condition, obviously.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, it goes back 75 years, but I can't verify. I know I've been involved since my father died. I've been one of the principal owners. So I know at least for the last 40 years, no one's ever questioned the 5-foot property line. We heard the reason for the request for variance, since the house is still under construction. There are alternatives. They mentioned the side yard, and they could either extend the deck within by right, put a second deck, and build it a different doorway on the side lot without any variance at all. And it's a very large lot. That is 150 feet. The R12 requirement is 30 feet in the front, 20 feet in the back. So the house within an inch or two, because they have very good engineering, extends that all 100 feet. So that's my testimony, that there really is a real detriment to this.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I have a question. I just want to reiterate. You said your house is 5 feet from your side of the property line?
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So that would be a total of 10 feet between the deck and your house?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's 75% reduction.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Anybody else want to be heard on appeal number 4135? Please come forward. Seeing none, I close it to the public. Mr. Pfeffer, you hear the neighbors?
I do hear the concerns. I do want to point out that I did have an opportunity to speak with Mr. Kramer at the last hearing. I did ask him if there was something we could try and work to mitigate any of his concerns. I indicated again fence, if there was any type of landscaping, and he indicated he didn't want to discuss it with me. As far as the lighting, we would have no objection to making sure the lighting work with the engineering, township's engineer, make sure the lighting's not shaded to his property. As far as the patio, we have the right to do the patio at the same height, at the same distance and size. We obviously would work to make sure that we alleviate any issues that the neighbor has. As far as the size of the patio, the applicant would agree to go to 7 feet off of the property line, so as to get a little bit further, so that we're down to 12 feet in between the two properties.
So is it possible to plant some trees as a barrier of separation, maybe arborvitae, something like that, fast growing?
Yeah, we have no objection to any landscaping. We have more extra plantings. We have no objection whatsoever. The plantings usually also give extra sound barrier more than the fence does. We do in addition to the fence.
Well, why can't both of those decks just be combined and just do it as a break? I mean,
The one deck is for the parents. So the parents, the deck that we're asking for is for the parents. And the parents need their privacy. They're going to have their own deck. So they're either going to have a deck or a raised patio. And the raised patio is going to have all the impacts, and the raised patio would be within 5 feet of the property line. So now we're saying we'll back it off another couple feet, so it'll be further away, and we'll do a fence and we'll do arborvitae. So,
the reason, I mean, if it's one family that's really under that one roof,
well, I mean,
I don't know why they wouldn't want to share the deck.
Mr. Gordon wants his parents to have the privacy that, that they requested.
It's not two separate families that need two
No,
separate decks.
no, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Is the Lakewood 10 foot by 30 foot? Is that what it is?
Correct, correct.
It'll still have that same 3 feet away from the building?
Yes, yes.
So then it will just have, in addition to it, we privacy and some type of landscaping.
Yes, we would do a row of arborvitae's, in the area of the deck. So with those conditions, certainly the impact on the neighbor is reduced by the deck versus the
Would you
raised
be able
bed.
to cut it down from 30 to something a little bit less than that? It's kind of quite large. 30 is the width, I know. It's
30 is the length.
The width, 300 square foot. Right. Yeah, I mean, but what's the problem with it being wide?
Well, it's just less area, people, less impact. You know,
The same,
more deck and,
the same barbecue is gonna happen there with the same noise.
well, not as big. Maybe a small.
I mean, the smaller one, if anything, would just make it more likely for anything to spill over onto the smaller one would make it more likely for anything to spill over onto the grass. And if they're hosting parties anyway. Not that, the size, you're just ending up restricting you're not even restricting the use, you're just restricting functionality by doing that. I don't see that, just my opinion, I don't see them making it
It's quite
better.
a large deck right now. In fact,
I understand that it's a large deck, but that's not what's in, the issue. The issue is the width.
We're discussing in the order, bring up one, saying you put rear yard setback. I am talking into the mic, someone's gotta fix these mics, Fran. Maybe put it to next year's budget. Practically eating it. This is probably the first time we've ever seen an application where it's 5 feet from a rear yard setback. That, you bring up a good point where a patio, this is more functional, I agree with you with that. If we're gonna start allowing decks within 5 feet of somebody else, and the other guy's house is 5 feet from his property line, and you're gonna plant plantings in the middle of a fence, you wouldn't be able to get a bicycle through the two sides.
Well, that's why we increased it to 7 feet. If you do 7 feet, the arborvitae's will be in 2 feet, you'll still have 5 feet. And there's gonna be a fence, so it doesn't matter that his house is 5 feet. Any access to his rear yard happens in 5 feet, and 5 feet is pretty routine. And I don't think the zoning board sees them as much as the planning board sees the 5 feet, which is a routine request for decks at the planning board and routinely granted since the ordinance was changed that the decks have to comply. Because 5 feet provides that access that's needed and is similar to an accessory structure, so you can have a shed there. What's going to be more of an impact, a shed or
Okay. Thank you, that's his testimony. Can I get a motion on this application, 4135?
I'll move to approve with the 7 feet and the trees, blocking in between the property line.
I have a motion to approve with the 7 feet and the blocking.
That's a 10
Many
by,
rows?
it's a 10 by 30, 6-foot fence and the arborvitae?
Yeah. Second.
Second, by Ruby Ann. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gelli?
No, thank you.
Mr. Halverson?
Yes.
Mr. Langley?
No.
Mr. Ribbiat?
Yes.
Mr. Ingram?
Yes.
Mr. Gross?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes. And Brian, the knee-jerk reaction of the town ordinances was to avoid and try to make sure that situations like this don't continue to happen. So maybe the planning board likes these type of situations, but we really try to get our setbacks to be where we're at. So I appreciate the 7 feet to give us more room. Okay, thank you. Moving forward, Mr. Kelly's back on the dais. We're looking at application 4127, Covington Village and Association. Street.
Chairman Michael J. Rose, here down at Alan Ciesla, on behalf of the Covington Village Condominium Association, Inc.
Okay, Mr. Frank, you can read it.
Separation of Covington Village to subdivide existing community into 2 separate lots. Amend prior site plan approval, conditional use variance relief.
We were here on July 1. I just wanted to quickly refresh the board's recollection. This is a division of the Covington Village development. There was litigation between the potential developer and the association. This is an attempt to settle that litigation. The potential developer did win the litigation, but we're trying to accommodate the condominium association. The condominium association had a vote on this plan. Approximately 90% of the members of the condominium association voted in favor of this plan, and that's why we're here tonight. The original development was 360 units. It was approved in 2003 by the planning board. Unfortunately, the developer, after constructing 210 of the units, went bankrupt, and the bank took the property back, and we are trying to divide this so that we would, the potential developer would develop 150 of the units, and the condominium association would retain the remaining 210 units. I have Mr. Bill Stevens as my professional engineer and Scott Kendall as my traffic consultant. Mr. Stevens was previously sworn. Do you want to swear him in again?
Let's do that. Mr. Stevens, please raise your, do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
Here's your full name, spell your last.
William Stevens, Stevens.
Thank you.
And I'm a professional engineer and planner licensed practitioner in the state of New Jersey, and have been appearing in front of this board for many years.
I'd like to accept Mr. Stevens as
Yes.
the professional engineer. Mr. Stevens, can you briefly just describe, condense your testimony from last time as to what is proposed here, and then talk about the changes, because we did have an issue with respect to the number of parking spaces. It turns out that Lakewood does not have an ordinance regulating parking for this type of use, so we defer to the residential site improvement standards, and Mr. Stevens will be testifying about those.
Okay.
So going back to where we left off at our last hearing, we had marked 2 exhibits, A1, which is an aerial display map of the subject property shown in yellow. In the center of the map, Lakewood Street located to the north, running east to west at the top of the map. As Mr. Gross stated in his opening remarks, the project is, the majority of the work is complete. The infrastructure is all in. The remaining work that needs to be done is the construction of the last 5 units, which will be located in the cleared area shown to the west of the existing Covington Village development.
5 units would be how many?
150 units.
So it's 5 buildings.
Correct.
5 buildings.
5 buildings.
Yeah.
5 buildings, 30 units in each building, the exact same product that was built as part of the original Covington Village. It's the same building, the same footprint. Referring to Exhibit A2 shows the existing 7 buildings in a lighter shade of tan, as well as the recreation center and the stormwater management ponds were constructed in the front of the property, all of which have been constructed. Then what we tried to do to make this easy for the board to understand is to color in the 5 buildings which are yet to be constructed, so the board can see exactly what it is we're talking about.
And you have the same ratio of 2-bedroom to 1-bedroom units?
We do, yes.
Which is 18 in each building, 1-bedroom and 12 of 2-bedroom?
That is correct. 18 1-bedroom units, 12 2-bedroom units in each building.
And I believe the point we left off at the last hearing was a discussion of parking. So can you review that, please, and just indicate by another exhibit what changes you've made in the layout to increase the number of parking spaces?
Yes. What we were talking about when last we broke was what the parking requirements should be for this project. The board might recall my testimony was that originally it was approved with 1 space per unit. For the 360 units that were originally proposed, each had 1 space per unit.
which does work for the senior community, but being that we're asking for these last 150 units to be non-age restricted, the board had reasonable concerns as to what the parking requirement should be for that, which is what the discussion ended up being. So the proposal is to subdivide off these two properties so they're going to be separate. So the top lot with the existing community would be lot 9.01. And based on the calculations that we submitted to the board, we believe that 336 spaces should be required. 379 spaces are provided. It's easy to see that it works because the community is built. It's occupied. There is ample parking on lot 9.01. There are no parking issues there.
And the Board of Trustees, I believe, of Condominium Association approved this and was satisfied with the number of parking spaces. Is that correct?
That is my understanding, yes. So then going down and looking at lot 9.02, being that the township doesn't have a parking requirement for this type of use, we refer back to the residential site improvement standards. And according to the residential site improvement standards, we are required to provide 282 parking spaces. So we originally only had 225 spaces with the plan we brought last time. So then what we did is we prepared revised drawings which were submitted to the board. So I'm going to introduce this as Exhibit 83. Which is very simply a copy of the plan that was submitted to the board with the additional parking being shown. We were able to add parking into the radius of Cole Lane where there was previously not parking located. We were able to add 35 parking stalls into that area. So that is the significant change that took place between the application or the plans we last presented and these plans.
Now looking for a total, how many now?
260 spaces.
250?
260.
150 units with 160.
That's correct.
And we're going to have Mr. Cannell testify with respect to the adequacy of those parking spaces. I have no other questions of Mr. Stevens. If the board wants him to repeat some of the testimony from this time, he can, but I know the time is short, so I don't want to take up too much of the board's time.
I appreciate it. Any board member have any questions for Mr. Stevens?
Yeah, I have it.
Engineer?
So the variance being requested is for 22 spaces, correct?
In terms of parking, yes.
Through the chair? Please, yes. So just so I can understand, the original was it 200 and something that was, what,
360.
360 that was built is age restricted, and the new ones are not going to be age restricted.
Correct.
Okay, so you're asking for a separation of the lot. Is there any reason why they can't continue and build it as age restricted as it was previously and approved for?
The market study that we did indicates that the market for age restricted is pretty weak in this area, and that's why we wanted non-age restricted. And the condominium association and the members agreed to that.
There's so many senior developments built and going up constantly. The age restricted community is humongous in this area.
I think, Mr. Rubio, the thing to look at here that's real evidence is the project's been sitting fallow for many years.
Is that because of this litigation?
No, it's because the market just wasn't there. I mean, the project wasn't finished because of the market and ended up being fallow, again, in my opinion, because of the market. So what the association and the future developer have looked at here is to come up with a plan that they think makes some kind of sense to get the project finished.
I'm not sure that's a good indicator because if you remember when the market tanked, even non-age restricted, that was our moment everywhere. So I don't think it's tied to age restricted. I think this went down when the economy went down, and now we're bringing it back up. So you want to bring it in ups and downs. What makes more money? We understand that, but it wasn't originally approved.
I have a question.
I'll be honest with you. I have some issues with this project. This was initially approved as an age restricted. Now you're going to be taking half the property and some of the space. The clubhouse and recreation area staying with the age restricted.
Yes.
Are you building new clubhouses and recreation areas for the new spin-off?
We are not building,
No clubhouse, no recreation, roads. So you could be sharing the same roads, access ways.
So the only point of access that would be shared would be the loop road coming in and out, what's known as Jared Court, off of Locust Street. So once you came into the project, what's intended to be is a separation at this point where you either turn right into the new development or you would continue straight into the existing development. It is our intention to separate that via a means of card reader gates so that it would be a gated access into the retirement community.
Is all the recreation area going to be for the new buildings?
No, the testimony was no.
Yeah, I mean.
We haven't proposed that.
You haven't proposed that? No. No clubhouse either? Okay.
So Mr. Keisel, who's the proposed developer, will testify as to why we're requesting this variance in terms of the age.
I think you just explained right now because you couldn't sell off. Is that your reason?
Well, we believe there's no market, but I think you should hear from Mr. Dyke.
Okay.
I have a question.
What are the size of these units?
Oh, go ahead.
Square footage.
One second.
I have a question. For the new developments, there is an HOA. Who's going to maintain the buildings? Who's the landlord?
It would be owned by the owner of it'll be a common ownership and owned by that.
These are going to be condos or
Rentals.
Rentals?
Yes.
So there'll be a landlord.
Correct.
And there's a barrier between the existing senior?
Yes.
And that will be?
Yes, what the intention is to provide a divider between the two communities via some fencing.
Yeah, I just asked how large the units are.
So,
bedrooms and sections, square
so
footage.
each building has 18 one-bedrooms and 12 two-bedroom apartments. The exact sizes of those, I think I'd have to defer back to my plans, I don't remember off the top of my head. But they're small units, and that's the point. This is not a community that's set to generate school children and those types of things.
Just before we presented it, we call them condos. So they're not condos, you're building an apartment complex. They're not being sold in for rental.
That is correct, yes, although the existing buildings are condominiums.
So the new project, not condos, apartment complex.
Correct.
How many units were approved originally?
360.
360. And how many are you proposing?
150.
No. 360
total.
The 360 was for both projects.
Was for both. Right. 210 been built. We're proposing 150. Right.
And I just want to mention to my bookworms, I know the area very well. And I know that they have a very large park right at the end of Locust and New Hampshire Avenue, with a Zion Park that has been upgraded, if I can see that. So there's a huge park right on the corner, maybe about 50 feet away from this development, where kids can play and so on and so forth. They have a huge recreation area for barbecuing and so on and so forth. I've seen it.
Just to the west of this property is Harrogate. And I know many people live in there, and they're not happy with this development at all. We're not happy with this new project.
How are buses and emergency vehicles going to be able to turn around?
So what we have done is for the original community, there is a turnaround that will be located at the intersection of Amy Court. What our proposal is for Cole Lane used to connect through, or still actually does today, connects through to 84. We want to separate this and make this an emergency access only with a gate, so that any emergency vehicles that were coming into the new development in Cole Lane, we're going to build a cul-de-sac which will allow vehicles to turn back around and get back out.
And buses for children to get picked up?
We have made an agreement with the homeowners association of the original community that children will be picked up on Locust Street. We're going to petition the Board of Education that there will be no busing inside of this development.
So they're gonna start, all the buses now will stop on Locust.
Which is where they stop now.
Right, but, you know.
We're not proposing to bring buses in,
No, I
nor do we
understand.
want.
I
Nor does the
understand.
community want us to.
Right.
The one thing we did agree to do to facilitate that though was to build a new sidewalk. There aren't currently sidewalks on Jarrett Court, so we had agreed with the homeowners association as part of our discussions to build a sidewalk out so that people could walk out to Locust Street in the event they want to utilize that street.
I feel that like if you're gonna, you know, a lot of planning goes into senior development, and there's a lot of leniency that also goes into senior development. I think once it gets converted to just, you know, for children and open market where you're gonna have different types of walks of life, I feel like it should be a little less dense. I just.
Stability issue also, because people are buying it and there for the long term. And this rentals is a turnover, and that creates more traffic, more influx, just more usage, more density.
I mean, there's gonna be children, it'll work beautifully as a senior development. You know, they're quiet, we work in senior homes, I know I'm in and out all the time, but once there's children on the buses, you know, I'm not sure the traffic and the parking and the buses and all that.
Right.
Just a little intense, big, you know.
Just to back up, Mr. Inkler, I have some reserves about this, mixing non-age restricted with age restricted. When this project was brought up, it was totally age restricted and it worked for them. And now to just throw in a new concept, besides the precedent that's going to be in Lakewood, that the guy someone comes from age restricted, he gets it lifted. But to mix young people with older people and school buses, when, you know, I think there could be some serious safety issues there.
Don't forget that the condominium association, which is the age-restricted portion of it, still has control over the common space, but they are in favor of this. So if anybody would be impacted, it would be them. And they don't have any problem with this. As I said, all of them had a vote, and approximately 90% of the homeowners there voted in favor of this. So I think that should tell you something about what they believe the impact will be, and they live there.
I live in a adult community in Lakewood, and in the last 3 years we've had 35% turnover in sales. So there is a demand for new housing, senior housing in Lakewood.
So this really isn't meant, our engineers, within his subject matter, but it is within Mr. Teichel's. So if you have a concern about that, why don't we hear from him?
Please.
Sir, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, so help you God? Could you give us your full name and spell your last?
Sure, it's Carey Teifel. It's C-A-R-E-Y. My last name is T like in Tom, A, J, F like in Frank, E-L.
Thank you.
And Mr. Teifel, are you the potential developer of the remaining 150 units?
Yes, I am.
And you've heard the concerns of the board in terms of changing this from an age-restricted to a non-age-restricted, age-restricted condominium to non-age-restricted rentals. Can you tell us your reasoning behind this change?
I'd like to just start with some background to give the board the benefit of knowing a little bit about myself and our company. Company is TFE Properties. We also have a division, Hotels Unlimited, and we have developed all throughout Ocean, Monmouth, and Middlesex, and Mercer counties. We have some properties in Lakewood that you might be familiar with. The Hilton Garden on Route 70. We also have the Vermont on Route 9 and 70, which is technically Tom's River. We have the Easy Self-Storage in Lakewood, and we recently developed Hampshire Crossing, which is an apartment complex very similar to this on New Hampshire Avenue and Route 70 that just opened back in February. This project here is we built a project in Bricktown that our traffic expert is going to speak to, because he did surveying there at that property, because the Lakewood one is not fully occupied. So you'll hear from him later. But this Covington Village layout is exactly like the product that we built in Bricktown, that was originally an age-restricted project that the age restriction was removed for a different set of reasons. But back to the concerns of the board about converting this, and a good point about why the market doesn't support age restricted. In this particular community, the one-bedroom units are selling for about $80,000 to $90,000 a unit, and the two bedrooms are selling for about $125,000 to $140,000 a unit. And those price points are far less than what it would cost to build this project new today, far less. So the economics, and I can't speak to the rest of other communities in Lakewood, but the anomaly to this over a lot of the other communities are, these are condo-style 3-story buildings, whereas a lot of the popular age-restricted product in Lakewood is single homes, so there's more square footage, there's more privacy. This product isn't on par with some of the other projects that you might be familiar with in Lakewood that are recently more popular with a lot of the turnover and the sales in that. So, as Mike testified before, or stated before, this community never got finished. The original developer went bankrupt, I'm not sure the year, but then the bank actually had to complete one building, the 7th building, because it was started and the developer walked, and they had hired somebody to complete it. They lost money on it, they decided they were done, and they ultimately put up the property for sale because it just did not work as an age-restricted project. So we intend to build a very respectable community that will be a neighbor of what's currently Covington Village. There's going to be a fence that divides the two communities, so they'll share common access, but there will be separate communities that will be separated by a visual fence so that they can stand alone and be neighbors, but not be fully integrated. If you drive past the access point, you go into one community and you leave that community. You can't get from one to the other without going back out and going in through the common access point.
Thank you. Do you have any other witnesses that want to testify?
Mr. Carroll, please. Any questions?
Any board members have any questions? Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Kennel, please raise your right. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, so help God?
I do. Scott Kennel, K-E-N-N-E-L, with McDonough and Ray Associates, as the testifying traffic expert.
Mr. Kennel has been accepted before as a traffic expert.
Mr. Kennel, have you evaluated the shortfall in parking of 22 spaces? And do you have an opinion, A, as to whether that number of parking spaces is sufficient for this use? And B, what do you base that opinion on?
Yes. Our office submitted a revised traffic report dated August 29, 2019, and there was a section there on the site plan and parking. And as was testified, the residential site improvement standards requires 282 parking spaces, which equates to approximately 1.9 spaces per unit. We're providing, on the plan presented tonight, the amended plan, 260 parking spaces, or 1.73 spaces per unit, which is approximately 92% of what's recommended by the residential site improvement standards. The next thing is I consulted with the Institute of Transportation Engineers Parking Generation Manual, which the 5th edition was published in January of this year. And what they state, based on the observations out of 119 sites, that the 85th percentile demand is approximately 1.5 spaces per unit. That's also consistent with my office experience at other apartment complexes similar to the one proposed. And as Mr. Teifel indicated, he has a apartment complex on Brick Boulevard in Brick, which we did observations on 4 evenings after midnight, which is typically the peak parking for an apartment complex. And that development has 120 apartments. 60% of them are 2-bedroom, with the balance 1-bedroom. As far as this complex, 60% of them are 1-bedroom and then the remainder are 2-bedroom. But the results of that analysis indicated that the parking demand was 1.5. vehicles per unit. Therefore, if we provide the 260 spaces, we're well below the demand experienced at a similar product in Ocean County and Bricktown. The residential site improvement standards permits a municipality to grant a deviation from the parking standard, and it's considered a de minimis exception. And they take that into consideration when you consider that the characteristic of the household proposed. So what I'm stating is that what we're presenting here with 60% of the dwellings as one bedroom, that the type of household, the experience at a similar product in the area, experience when I firm with others similar developments, that it's appropriate for the municipality to consider this alternate parking standard that would provide us, again, 92% of what the RSIs recommend. And in my opinion, the peak demand would be somewhere in the range of 225 to 230 vehicles versus 260 spaces are proposed, and therefore that there would be adequate parking to support the 150 dwellings.
The project that you were referring to in Brick?
Yes.
Is that a new project, an old project?
It's approximately been fully completed approximately 2 years ago, and it's fully occupied, all 120 dwellings. And it's located on Brick Boulevard, just south. It's called the Boulevard, but it's located just south of Beaverson Road on Brick Boulevard.
Are you a traffic expert? Is that your?
Yes.
Okay. Do you take into account 150 senior units as opposed to 150 regular age units?
Oh yes. I mean, as far as the age restricted, their peak demand is generally one vehicle per unit, and our office has conducted a number of parking accumulation studies of the existing dwellings in Covington Village, and the demands have been somewhere between 0.9 and 1, depending on when we did our observations. So there's definitely a distinct difference between age restricted and non-age restricted. And that's why we did the research at a similar product, and we also increased the parking supply by 35 parking spaces.
Anybody else have any questions for the traffic? None?
Thank you.
Mr. Gross?
I have no other witnesses.
No other witnesses? No. Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
There was testimony that about 90% of the existing owners agreed to this.
Yes.
Is it documented?
Yes, that's been provided. Since the last meeting, Mr. Gross provided to me what they refer to as a Covington Village Condominium Association Judges Certification. 83.73% voted to do that. 2.51 decided not to do it. It was 83 to 2. If you think about it that way. And I guess the rest of them voters. Is that right, Mr. Berger?
Yes. Can I ask a question, please? What is this piece of property approved for, if not for this? What zone is this in?
Right now it's in the R-20 and the 12C residential cluster zone.
12C, which is a cluster?
Yes.
Which is what?
Cluster zone.
Basically, you want to substitute 150 units of seniors for 150 units of non.
Correct. We're not violating the density or.
In my opinion, 150 seniors is much less impact than non-seniors. So I'm not in favor of this project.
But the density is allowed by the ordinance. So the 150, the governing body has determined that there's no problem in terms of impact with the 150 non-age restricted units, because we're not asking for variance in the density or any other types of ordinances that would affect the impact.
Mr. Gross, was the original approval of these 150 units for one bedrooms? two bedrooms?
No, it was the same ratio
Same
as.
ratio, 18 and 12?
18 and 12, correct.
I just want to clarify something. Assume for the sake of the argument that these were two totally separate pieces of property. The old property was approved, one was approved for, and this is just green grass and trees, and you're coming before us today with a brand new application in this R20 zone. What is the maximum that you'd be able to build?
It would be at least this. I don't know if we can build more, but it would be at least this density, because we don't need any variances for density. I just don't know if we can build more.
What zone is this?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
R20? How many acres of land do we have here?
I disagree with that. I think it will be slightly less than this based on the number of proposed parking spaces. So you would have to, in order to be variance free, I mean, the land was what it was. That's not changing, but if you can't get the maximum number of parking spaces to get the variance, then you should reduce the number of units back to the 260 spaces he's proposing.
And that would be how many?
It'd probably be like 4.5 buildings. Yeah.
Yeah, but the density is allowed. We're just asking for variance from the parking space.
Or put more parking spaces.
The board asked the question what it would be. In my opinion, it would be more like 135 units as opposed to.
Right. I would like to see a project. I would like to see the project with access, with the parking, a clubhouse. But here we're spinning off. They got the approval was based on a shared clubhouse, a shared pool, shared parking spaces, shared open spaces, and now, road that came all around. Now with that, I want to see how it works. How does the bus getting in or not getting in? Where is the bus going? I'm not saying I'm against this project. I would just, you can't spin off 150 seniors and spin them off the non-seniors. Seniors are very low impact in every way. And here, you could have people that are with 2 kids, 3 kids, who knows what. They're playing baseball and jumping the fence, and they got seniors being impacted. I think the people that voted on this probably had a financial impact that they needed to vote on, and that's why they voted in that way. But overall, they will probably sell out at some point or move out. Someone else will be in there, and it's got to work for the next guy, and I'm not sure if it will work.
Well, I can't speculate as to why people voted the way they did. All I can say is they voted in favor of this. 83% did, only 2% didn't. So I can't speculate why they voted. All I know is they did vote to approve this, and they live there. In terms of buses, we indicated we don't want any buses in here. The County Association doesn't want any buses, so we anticipate that the buses will be stopping on Locust Street to pick up any children. But I heard a concern about children, and Mr. Teifel wanted to testify to that.
Then I'm just going to stress one thing. The next condo association might want buses in. What are you going to do then?
Well, then we have to petition the Board of Education. The Board of Education is not going to allow buses in there if they feel it's unsafe.
May I ask a question before you get up to the table?
Sure.
We talked about, at this point, who's carrying the expenses of this particular property, the taxes and any other maintenance? Is that being swallowed by the maintenance fee for the convent, for the association at this point?
You mean for the 150?
Yeah, there's a whole piece of property, there's tax, all kinds of expenses involved. Who's carrying that expense at this point?
Mr. Teifel's company is.
Okay, is that being passed along to anybody in the association?
No.
So when the homeowners are voting this, there's no financial gain in particular because their now fees are going to go down because this property is being sold.
Correct.
That's not a
No. It's not my understanding that we're contributing to their maintenance costs and the clubhouse costs.
So why would they?
Right now, there's one lot, right?
Correct.
That wasn't my question. My question wasn't the lot. My question wasn't, are they contributing towards the clubhouse? My question was, this entire piece of property as it stands right now, if it's not going to be subdivided for private housing, there's taxes, there's other expenses involved. Who's paying for that now? Is that Mr. Taco paying incrementally? Okay?
So, yes, our company is paying the taxes on those individual lots. We also contribute something toward there was an agreement reached between the bank and the community before we got involved. That was a set monthly amount that we continued, but it really is an offset to what they're paying to plow and do whatever they do for the part that we own. So the answer is it's not a meaningful contribution in terms of that true up, but the property taxes are paid by our company.
Mr. Chaco, because you purchased this out of bankruptcy, prior to you coming into the picture, who was covering those expenses?
The bank, the lender.
The lender was, and it was not being passed on to the association.
Again, taxes were always paid by the property owner. It was the lender who agreed to some sort of settlement with the community to help offset some of the costs to cover the lawn maintenance, although it's minimal, and the land and the snow removal for the undeveloped part. So the bank cut that deal with the community, and we honored it and continued it. But it's not anything that's immediate. It's basically meant to cover so that they're not paying for that portion that they're not benefiting from. So to answer your question, there's no meaningful financial benefit. In fact, to the contrary, because they'll be losing that benefit once this were to go through.
I have a question. The last time we had a conversion was Mr. Zucker, and that was on Pine Street, and that was when the state law changed. If this is the same lot or block as the original development, I don't understand where they have the right to convert this to an adult community. The law wasn't such several years ago, and Mr. Zucker was the first person to do it. It was only because it was on Pine Street. It was two separate lots. This is not. This is the same property. So how can you convert when it's been approved for an adult community? How can you now convert it to a non-age restricted community? I don't understand.
That's why we're here. We can if we work out an agreement with the community, but that's why we're here. We're de-annexing from.
I don't know if this board has the authority to approve that kind of a conversion.
Jerry, the reason what Hal is saying is that it's deed restricted for age restricted community, then they're separating it because they had a conversation with the homeowner association that would like to see it filled up. Are we allowed, if we vote yes on this project, that will basically make this project a non-deed restriction, will take away the deed restriction from being adult-only community to adult plus.
The deed restrictions which govern the entire tract called for age-restricted units. The deed restrictions also said that they can change those requirements by, I think it was a 3/4 vote. They got 83% who said we want to do this.
So the individuals the homeowners can change it.
Basically, that's what they did.
Right. Well, hold on. See, let me just ask you, what's the need for the minor subdivision? What are you subdividing? There's a minor subdivision application.
Yes, we're subdividing off the 210 units from the 150.
So the 150 units, proposed units,
yes.
Is that now part of the tax lot of the adult houses, the adult lots?
Yes.
Well then, how was your client paying taxes if there's one tax bill? Let's. Yes, ma'am. Would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth?
I do.
And could you give us your full name and spell your last?
Sure. Name is Francine Teifel, spelled T like Tom, A, J, F like Frank, E, L.
Got it.
And what is your position with the proposed developer?
I'm general counsel to the company.
And can you respond to Mr. Dansky's question?
Yeah, so because the entire lot was subject to the condominium form of ownership pursuant to a master deed, the town assessor then came in and assigned a lot number to each individual unit of the 360 units. And so when Mr. Teifel was saying that he was paying the taxes, the real estate taxes with respect to the 150 lots, that was pursuant to 150 tax bills that he receives each year. And he was alluding to the contribution to the condominium assessments that was collectively imposed upon the 150 unconstructed units. Because they're unconstructed, they're not obligated to contribute what the constructed units would otherwise contribute. And so, as he explained, prior to his involvement, an agreement had been struck whereby the owner of the 150 unconstructed units were going to contribute a fixed fee toward the ongoing operational expenses of the condominium.
So sorry, you finished?
I was going to go on to explain what it is we're trying to accomplish here and what the settlement agreement provided for as far as subdividing and breaking away, because there was some question as to how these units can be discharged from the condominium.
Well, you're saying that there's already existing 150 condominium units that were approved, and you're getting separate tax bills for those 150 units.
Right. And so the agreement with the condominium association provided that as part of the settlement agreement, those 150 units would be discharged via a document of public record from the condominium. And the association, which has purview and administers the affairs of the condominium, including the common element land upon which all of these improvements are constructed, would permit this subdivision and then convey by deed this lot 9.02 to the developer. All of this has been thoroughly fleshed out in the settlement agreement, a copy of which we've delivered to you, with multiple exhibits that include the deed, include cross easements, all different forms of documentation that have been thoroughly negotiated, carefully vetted, shared with the township attorney, and engineer, and are available for the review of anyone on the board.
The settlement agreement talks about the owner of your lot. I forget which one is now 01 or 02.
We don't own the lot yet. We own 150 unconstructed units. Right.
That's going to be 902, I believe.
It will be 902.
The owner of 902, per the settlement agreement, has to contribute towards maintaining the basin and the other improvements which are on the other lot.
Yes, that's all part of a cross-access, cross-utility easement, so that all
Who owns that basin?
The basin sits on future lot 9.01. But we, as the owners of future lot 9.02, would contribute towards certain maintenance costs toward maintaining that detention basin because it benefits the entire parcel.
So the basin is owned by the HOA?
Yes. It's a condo association, just to be precise, as distinguished from a homeowners association.
Back to my question, does it infringe upon the existing age restriction that's in place? Is this being broken by this agreement?
Well, the agreement between them, yes, Jane.
So someone living there in the age restricted could turn around and sell the unit to a 25-year-old?
Oh, you're talking about does it affect it?
Yes.
No, it doesn't affect the age.
It's the same lot.
Not anymore.
Let me start, please. The age restricted requirement on the existing units remain for now. That association, which presumably is getting subdivided in the future, hope to change those bylaws again, but I don't know how you can do anything about that.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'd like to open up to the public.
I want to address a couple of the issues that were raised by board members.
I'll keep it very brief. A couple of questions that were asked that I don't believe were answered. One was the size of the units. They're approximately in the 800 to 875 square feet for the one bedrooms and about 1,100 to 1,200 square feet for the two bedrooms. Again, the same product we built in Bricktown and the same product that we built in Lakewood at Hampshire, crossing on New Hampshire Avenue. Also, the other thing that came up was the fence. I think you talked about separation. The community wanted a 7-foot fence instead of the typical 6-foot fence for that privacy factor. We were happy to agree to that. So again, there should be a really complete separation. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention was as far as school children, because it came up about buses. This is really a market project targeted toward, anybody can rent there. And by design, it's not designed for people with a lot of children because it's 1 and 2 bedrooms. In our Bricktown project that has more 2 bedrooms, it has 60% 2 bedrooms and 40% 1 bedrooms, whereas this is the opposite. We have tracked anywhere from 5 to 7 school children who go to the school system out of 120 units in Bricktown. So if you do the, and in our project in Lakewood, I don't have stats, but we're 65% occupied, and it's the same demographic and the same type of clientele that we have out of Bricktown project. We expect the same clientele here, and so, if you do the math, if it's 7 children for about 120 units, it should be 10 or 11. So there shouldn't be a lot of activity with school buses whatsoever based on the demographic and the clientele that we imagine renting to at this project.
Mr. Chadwell, while you're still there,
Yes.
the existing buildings on the other line, are they 18 and 12 also, 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom?
Yes, they are. The same product.
And is it the same square footage of the 2 bedrooms in there that what
Yes.
you're proposing?
Yes.
What about the Hampshire, I don't remember what you call it, Hampshire Commons, which is closer? What's the stats there for the solution?
I don't know. But one other question that came up was as far as recreation. So at our project, that's pretty close by Hampshire Crossing, it's 74 units. We don't have really an amenity package, and it certainly has not hurt us with the rentals of it. In Bricktown, we do have, it was an existing project that we took over, we do have a clubhouse and a pool. We're not proposing that for here. However, there is a building in the middle of, to show you. Right over there. That building is going to be retained by us. It was the maintenance shop for the community, and it was our thought that we might put in like an exercise room and just a light area in that space because it's in the middle of the community that we're creating, and it would be something that would be similar to what we have at Hampshire Crossing, just a small exercise room for the residents. But nothing beyond that. There would not be room or opportunity for us to put in a pool or any amenity like that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mullin, Mr. Gross, can you get Mr. Stevens to put his professional planning hat on? What's the legitimacy for the variance for the parking spaces? Can you, if you testify to that, I missed it.
Well, we didn't give that type of testimony for this. It would be a C2 variance. What Mr. Kennel's testimony was, what he was basically trying to say was that we have enough parking to meet the requirements of this community, so that in effect, even though we don't meet the letter of the law, we meet the intent of the law because of the product that we're proposing.
That's it?
Okay, thank you. I'd like to open up this application to the public. Anybody here from the public wants to say anything on 4127 Covington Village, please come forward. You have 4 minutes to speak. And address your questions to the board, please.
Sir, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
Can you give us your full name, spite of that?
Yes. Yehuda Rottenberg.
Get it to the mic.
Yehuda Rottenberg.
Can you spell your last name, sir?
Rottenberg. 331 Sophie Lane. I'm a resident of Covington Village for the last 5 years.
Mr. Rottenberg, please.
Okay. You understand, I think it's something that people missing here. Who is the applicants here?
The applicant's the association.
Okay. Who is signing the applicant?
I'm sorry, sir?
Who is signing the applicant? The president of the association, which our name is Joanne Kalmansky. There's no Taifel, no nothing here. We're actually looking properly at this, and really what's happening here is the home association, the president representing, wants to start the market today. The person is sitting here, and an only asked question that was raised by the board and by Mr. Lankey, all she said, she did yes, 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 yes. And the first question everybody asked here, why is the home association, because the only home association for senior, come in one divided lot, which has never happened in Lakewood. The reason why, because in Pioneer Village, the developer, Somerset, still, there wasn't an association yet, it was a developer that asked about a lot. Here's a home association, the president wants, and they said they vote 83%. The big question come ask, why they vote 83%? Now we're explaining. And another issue, they asked me something I failed. Everybody asked, why don't you want senior? He said, because the market doesn't allow it. And you know why? I'll tell you why. Because the plain reason here, this subject, and the reason is, And they agree to it because they do not want Orthodox people to come to the community. And that's the reason why it's in country place everybody knows, used to be time, you could sell for $40,000, $50,000. The minute Orthodox people came in, now it's $200,000, $300,000. And me myself, and the reason why Orthodox community don't come, every time the Orthodox community wants to buy a unit there, they tell me, it's interesting because it's building. So you need to enter to the building, you need a fob. You will not be able to go on Saturday because we got to live this. And everybody asks me, I'm the only Orthodox person who lives there. And they don't want to give me a key, which they can do it. I can really force it, but I don't want to do it. So what I'm trying to say, Mr. Teifel comes and says he can't sell it. He was offered many times. He bought the unit, the place, $1.2 million, and the only reason why he's doing he thinks, because now they're like, when you guys approve it, and you approve something you never approved before, I'm telling you, I did research on it, and I know exactly what's going on. Its property value goes from $1 million, $1.2 that he bought it, to $6-8 million. And basically what's happening here, the association asked to subdivide it and give a present. And why? And when they bought 83%, this was the reason why they told us. Listen, Mr. Teifel going to build it, and he told them many times, I'm going to bring Orthodox people, they're going to stop sharing you swimming things and their issues. So they came to the associate, to the member, and told, listen, if other women take our lifestyle, whatever it is, better to do it. And they don't understand one thing. They actually, it's a debt to themselves, because their property value will never go up. Because especially if you come and visit, what's going to be, you talk about school buses. I just give you an answer. If you've got to listen to it, you see, you understand, this is not built the regular community. It's built, listen, to take a kid from here to here, the bus is going to have to wait there now. In a small thing like this, there's no way that everybody's going to take a kid. If the community will come to see how the place looks like, they say, it's crazy. Beside the point, there's a little road, there's two little roads coming here. And again, why to approve? Only for two reasons. Discrimination, the Orthodox people cannot buy. Second, to make somebody that bought a lot for 1.2, you're right, he's a big builder, he has a lot of influence. And if this gets approved, and later on somebody contested, they're going to raise the voice why this was approved. Maybe because this is a big developer. So I'm saying here, and again, you can come and ask, one of the members asked, they asked, why do you approve it? They said, you know what they told? Yeah, because Mr. Teifel put a gun to our head. And also the litigation was not good litigation. He did not win the litigation. The way they explained it, the wrong way.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to be heard on application 4127 Covington Village, please come forward. You have 4 minutes to address your questions to the board.
So raise your right hand. You affirm to tell the whole truth?
I do.
Give us your full name, spell your
My name is
last.
Shaya, S-H...
I'm sorry?
Shaya Klein, S-H-A-Y-A, K-L-E-I-N, and I live back to back with Covington Village and with the Homeowners Association.
Hey, just spell your last name again for me.
Klein, K-L-E-I-N.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I live back to back with Covington Village. Marriage is 32 Vilma Lane. I'm with the Homeowners Association of Locust Landings, which is right over here. I'll show you. This property, I would like to give you just 3 pieces of papers, just for the board members. Just a second.
What are the pieces of paper that you're handing out?
Approval from the board and from the 69 homeowners that live in that development to represent them, and 2 pictures, what it looks like back to back to Covington Village.
Okay, now, but this is your interpretation? Are you an attorney, or you represent anybody?
No, I represent 69 families with the Homeowners Association.
From what development?
Locust Landings, right next to Covington Village.
Is he allowed to give us information?
I'm not sure what you're trying to give us, sir. Can you try it again, Mr. Klein? What are you giving us?
I want to give a testimony.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, what's the document? What
I'm just showing pictures, so when I talk, they could understand what I'm talking about.
They're pictures. I thought there was something different.
There's one letter from the Homeowners Association.
Give it to the attorney. Take a look at it.
Have you seen this stuff, Mr. Gross? Hold on a second. You have any objection to that, Mr. Rose? No objection? Okay. That's a statement signed by, I guess, 5 or 6 board of directors of the Locust, authorizing the gentleman to speak for them.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You have 4 minutes.
What I want to say is I'm here representing 69 families. I'm not here myself. I'm the name of 69 families living back to back with Lakewood Village. I am very, very against changing. It should be not age restricted for a few reasons. Number one, there's no fence between our community and Lakewood Village. So there'll be 150 units, which 60 of them would be 2-bedroom and 90 of them would be 1-bedroom, would have a lot of kids. Well, 5 or 7 would brick. I don't know if that sounds very, very weird to me, but 150 units will definitely have more than 5-7 kids. And kids are running around and playing around. I constantly have complaints from Joanne, the president of Compton Village, about our kids making noise and dirt and reducing the value of their property because we have kids over there. So I don't want to get into why they made an agreement, but there was an agreement made in the homeowner association. Starting with the fact that there's not enough parking. There's not enough parking in the new community that they want to set up. I wouldn't call it a community since it would be only renters, which renters don't care, brings crime, noise, and a lot of other not good stuff. So if there would be no parking, not enough parking, there's no parking on Locust Street. We have a big parking lot where people do park in our parking lot, which means that a lot of people that would rent over there would come over and park by our lot. We have our development playgrounds, which is closer to Covington Village than the Zio Park that Mr. Gonzalez mentioned before, which means kids would just walk over, not from the street, just walk back to back, going into using our playground, which is happening already from the surrounding streets. I could say even Mr. Rottenberg, we had a little argument when I once stopped him walking through the property, going through, say, Tashlech or Rosh Hashanah, or right after Rosh Hashanah last year. I told him, you're not allowed to walk through this property. This is my property, this is the development property, you're not allowed to pass through. It's a very, very big detriment to our community, and we're going to have a lot of traffic, school bus stops. The value of our development is going to go down if this is going to be changed for a non-age restricted zone. Regarding rentals, I would say they're not allowed to rent it out. The approval they got from court to rent it out was only for 55 plus. The approval to rent it out was not a non-age restricted, which they did not mention before.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask you a question? Just a quick question. Your development is on the side of the seniors, not the side of these
Correct.
huge houses. So how does that affect the putting of fence in any case?
What do you mean how it affects? It's not going to be blocked off. It's going to have 7%.
It's a fence.
It's going to be 7%. So is there going to be someone who's going to watch the kids not to go out? Is there going to be someone who's going to stay in the community, the old age community parking lot, and say you're not allowed to pass through? We even have all the people passing through. We're not going to have kids now. Well, they'll of course pass through.
Where are people passing through, from where to where?
I'll show you right over there.
This is the parking lot, this is Silver Lane, and right over there, this is our playground.
You show me the basement to the development. No, on the other hand, who's passing through now from Covington to your playground?
Right now,
So Mr. Rutherford wants to play in your playground?
No.
Clicks on it. I don't understand. Click on it.
We have a street for. This is our development. It doesn't have the full picture, but this is the development with 69 family houses. And we're telling them that this is a quiet area and it's an age restricted area. This is where it is, it's codified over here. Our playground is somewhere here on top. This is a street called Isabella, has no fence, but nothing to do about it at the moment, people go to the playground. Having this for kids, which is not going to be 5-7 kids, as Mr. Clappy mentioned before, people are going to pass through, it's not supposed to be a wall there, yeah, it's going to be open, okay? Nobody's going to be here, they're not going to have police officers telling them, oh, you're not allowed to come in here, because this is your home age community. They're actually going to pass through the cars there from all sides. Somebody wants to walk in the door, somebody wants to walk around the
Mr. Klender, I ask you a question. Why are they walking through your development to go where?
Get to the playground, get to the
Playground.
We have a playground in our development. We have a clubhouse in our development. We have a parking
So
lot
you're
in our
scared
development.
people are going to come into your playground to play?
Yes, they actually do already.
Old people?
No, not all people, from the different streets.
Okay, thank you. Good. Anybody else would like to be heard on?
Yes.
Bill number 4127, please come up.
So raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth?
I do.
Can you give us your full name and spell your last?
Vincent Chiappi, C is in Charles, IOFFI. 638 Sophie Lane, Lakewood, New Jersey. I'm a resident of Covington Village for 11 years. I'm an owner. Mr. Rottenberg gave quite a bit of information. Did he tell you that he was interested in buying that property, but couldn't get his hands on it? What? Did he tell you that he came to a community that had only fobs to enter the building and keys for your own personal door? It's a known fact to him, but he bought it anyway. Does he have any furniture in his unit? I don't know. We didn't discriminate against him buying it. But he was aware that there's fobs, there's elevators, there's 3 stories. It's a senior community. Why did the people of Covington Village agree and vote that way? First of all, the common area for the entrance to this Covington Village has never been fully paved. Why? Because the community was never completed, 100%. Now, that a developer will start their property that will be fully paved. Instead of the sewer being up 3-4 inches and we keep running our tires. Now, the community next to us, where Mr. Klein lives, the builder there told Mr. Klein when they purchased, he was going to put a fence so the children could not come into Covington Village. He put no fence. We offered to split the difference and put up a fence with the builder. He declined. Mr. Klein, with his own wife, said he was going to put his own fence just in his area of his property. He put a separation fence, but not a fence to bar the children coming into our property. We don't cross his property. We don't go to his schoolyard. We don't go to his playground. We're senior citizens, so who's going in there? Not us. Now, I paid full price for my property. I'm not praying that it's worth $100,000 less than what I paid. I have to live somewhere. I'm familiar with Lakewood. I came from Brooklyn, New York. I'm familiar with Borough Park. I delivered many cars from Borough Park to Lakewood. I worked for Mr. Hitchcock in Brooklyn for 10 years after my retirement. I know the area well. So it's not discrimination that I moved to Lakewood. I lived in Brooklyn, Borough Park. I didn't live in Borough Park. 2 miles from Borough Park, and I worked in Borough Park for 10 years. I was up to Muncie every week. So I went from Muncie, New City, you name it. And throughout Borough Park, so I'm not discriminating. We have Jewish residents in Covington Village. They're not Hasidic, they're not, but they're Jewish residents. No discrimination bias. What happened is our builder who built Covington Village was Jewish, but he pulled out, he went bankrupt. But they all have separate companies. He upstairs with money.
and nothing was done. Our maintenance is high because of the nature of our buildings. A single home, you put your own lane. Your own there's no halls to be cleaned. Air conditioning halls, heated halls, elevators.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chiappi, why were you specifically named in the settlement agreement? Are you on the board of directors?
No, I was on the board. I was on the board, I just came off the board.
When you
I was on the board for 4 years.
when you voted for the to change the bylaws, were you aware that the developer wanted it to be non-age restricted?
Yes, sir.
Is that in the settlement agreement anywhere? Because I can't find it.
No, we voted on it.
There is?
No, it's not in the thing.
All right, maybe that's
It's like 15% of it.
All right, fine, thank you.
But the Wizard Woods voted at that percentage.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else wants to be heard on appeal number 141? Jerry, quick question. It's getting late. We have other applications that are not going to be heard. Can I take 2 minutes and just carry those applications?
Sure. Maybe you can show me where it is in this document.
Wait 1 second here. Before you come with you. Okay. Anybody here for appeal number 3935B? Katan Beth? Katan Meta?
It's Adam Shepard.
4107, High Point, Lakewood condominium? Yes, we're not going to give. Okay, so would you have a problem with having it tabled?
No.
So next meeting?
Are we? October?
28th, and you agree to wait time?
You have to be a wait time.
Oh, sure, yeah.
No further notice.
So, excuse me, appeal number 41, anybody here for appeal number 4107, High Point at Lakewood condominium? That's going to be heard at our next meeting, October 28th. No notice and no waiver of time. Thank you.
Any way to push the person on the agenda then? Because the second time they get.
Why? We already made a decision on that, so you have to wait for the 28th. Appeal number, anybody here for appeal number 4128? 121 Somerset LLC? Yes. Very much, you know that the time is late, so we're not going to be able to get to it. Are you wanting to?
We'll carry it to October 28th, no further notice, and we will waive time.
Okay. Board members, I need a vote. All in favor? Anybody here for appeal number 4128? Excuse me, we're still in session. Can you please walk out quietly? It would be appreciated.
Thank you for being
Thank you. You're welcome. Appeal number 4128, 121 Somerset LLC will be heard on our next meeting, October 28th, with no waiver of time. So anybody here for that appeal will not be heard this evening. Appeal number 4131, 910 Park Lakewood LLC.
John Doyle, on behalf of the applicant, to waive the time, we ask that no further notice be given and we be heard on October 28th.
Okay, we have appeal number 4131. Can I get a motion? Second. All agree?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, appeal number 4131, 910 Park Lakewood LLC will be carried to October 28th with a waiver of time and no notice given. Now, Mr. Pfeffer, welcome back. Appeal number 3935B. Katan Meta. You know, we're not going to be able to hear it. It's rateable. So, quickly. Hotel, yeah.
I'm ready.
5 minutes.
No problem, October 28th, no further notice, and we waive the penalty.
Okay, great.
Thank you
So,
very much.
Bill number 3935D, anybody here for Ketan Mehta? We heard October 28th, with a waiver of time, and no notice will be given. Thank you. 4 minutes, address your questions here. We're back to appeal 4127.
My name is Moshe Zainis, Z-I-N-E-S, 112 Elmhurst Boulevard, Lakewood, New Jersey, 08701. I have a question. On this proposed road, how wide is the roadway? The line top of the roadway?
Okay, no, we'll get you that information. Right, what other question do you have?
So, the comment, my comment is that if this approval does not go through and they are forced to do the 5 buildings as a regular age restricted thing, as the original approval, then the clubhouse and the playground, whatever they have here, the amenities would be shared by all the age-restricted people who live there. So, to answer Sal's question here as to why the current homeowners association members may have been inclined to vote yes to change this, this is a suggestion, because they're thinking, now we don't have to share the amenities with the other people there. Okay? That's my comment. And my suggestion is, perhaps, sorry, one more question. Do you know how long is this? Distance wise? How far is it? A quarter mile, half a mile, mile? Those are my questions. And my suggestion is that we go 50-50 over here. There's obviously a parking issue over here. I don't know what they're talking about, that there's a different type of usage, so there's a different calculation with the parking. All I know is that people, like, they need beds, they also need cars. You can't say, well, it's a certain type of apartment, so you only need like half a bed per person. Like, that doesn't make any sense. The same amount of people makes up a family, makes up a certain amount of cars. It just doesn't work in the other way. I'm not sure what happened in Bricktown, but if you have the families here, you'll have the cars. So the parking variance, that's off the table as far as I'm concerned. But my suggestion is we go 50-50 over here. If you got me the answer about the road, I would say the road could be a wider road than their current road, because I understand that certain trucks, I'm not going to go into which department I'm a member of, but there are certain emergency vehicles that have had a hard time getting into the road around the corner. You may recall there was a fire 2 years ago. I'm not going to speak for the fire department, but yeah. So my suggestion would be is to make the road into a normal road that all kinds of trucks and buses can get to. Make it a normal road. Reconfigure the buildings to be houses. Another suggestion I have is also how we could go 50-50 is keep it a senior development like the original approval. I manage a property across from the Fairways. I know that the Fairways built a bunch of houses a couple of years ago. As far as I know, those houses are now people living in them. The Enclave as well has a whole bunch of houses sold in the last couple of years, and the realtors are going at it like realtors do. So to say that there's no market, I just don't buy that. I think perhaps they should restructure, like to build houses for seniors. I think there is a market. Like I said, I mean, the Fairways have new houses built, and those houses are sold. The Enclave has a house that's sold. I don't buy this claim of that we just can't sell to any seniors. They're still around, so they're still buying.
Thank you very much.
You heard my questions, you heard my suggestions. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, before Mr. Stevens even comes up, after listening to these questions, understand that except for the 5 buildings, everything on this site is already constructed. All the improvements are installed, the roads exist. You can't, it's too late to change all that.
How wide is the street paved? And how long
But
is
it
the...
doesn't even matter. It's done. Built. I don't care if it's 28, 32, it just doesn't matter, it's built. You're not changing it now.
That is a very valid point, Mr. Knight. I mean, the entire community, the infrastructure is constructed. It's not just the roads you see, it's everything that goes underneath the land. So I wasn't exactly sure what the question was.
How wide is the paved street? That's all in the edge.
Come to the mic, please.
I speak really loud, and I try to. So Mr. Dasty, there are several streets within this development that are different. So coming into the street, coming into the project, there's a street known as Jared Court East and West. They are one-way streets. So they only provide traffic in one direction. I think I know the answer to this. They are approximately 20 feet in width.
No, I'm sorry, I wasn't very clear. Mr. Stevens, how wide is the main thoroughfare? Pavement.
So the main boulevard coming into the project. Again, it's a divided boulevard, so they're about 18-foot wide drive aisle, something like that.
18 foot total?
No, in each direction.
All right, so it's
divided boulevard.
After the fence were to be constructed, it would be 18 feet paved on each side of the fence? Is that what you're saying?
So the first thing we're talking about, so we have two one-way streets, Jared Court East, that come in and out.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the main thoroughfare where the fence is going to be located.
Then there's a boulevard that is going to stay on lot 9.01 for the senior communities as provided boulevard. These are approximately 18 feet in width. The drive aisles, although we do have a bypass around where the gates are going to go, which will be wider. And then the other community coming into Cole Lane, the width of the corridor that we travel, I mean, basically it's a parking lot. It's got a 24-foot wide two-way drive on it. That's how it was designed.
How wide is Sophie Lane?
Does that answer?
It's not a private.
One second.
You're saying it's not.
One second, one at a time. One second. How wide is Sophie Lane?
These are the same, Mr. Gelli.
36.
It's 24 feet wide for a drive aisle, and then two 18-foot wide parking stalls on either side of that. It's actually 60 feet in width. It's all curved to curve.
Well, the parking area is 24, the driving area is 24 feet wide.
That's correct, yes.
And is that wide enough for, Mrs. Evans, sit down, please, stop it. Is that wide enough for our garbage trucks?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We can get garbage trucks, fire trucks, and school buses through the entire development and turn back around. However, I do want to be clear so nobody in the community gets mad. We did say we're not going to bring school buses into the development. Although it could happen. I know that was something that was discussed down the road. So it is possible, but it's not what is being proposed by staff.
Okay, that's your testimony.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for board members? Seeing none, closing it, I'd like to get a vote from the board. Mr. Gross, you want some tonight?
Yes, I know the hour's late, and I'll keep it extremely brief. Just wanted to, again, mention that we are seasoned developers who've done projects in Lakewood, including ones that you know, in fact, that I mentioned before. We've done similar projects like this in Lakewood and every town in other towns. The product works. We work tirelessly with the community to achieve a result that was a win-win for them and us. If there were other people, you heard very few objectors tonight, but certainly everybody was noticed, and we think the most important thing that we should take into consideration is, does it work, which we think it does, and also did we satisfy the majority of the residents who live there, who voted upon it, we delivered the proofs that that happened. So we hope that you'll give it serious consideration and approve us tonight. Thank you very much.
And the only thing I'd like to say is, look, Mr. Tyko is a seasoned developer. If he could economically continue the age-restricted development, there's no reason for him not to do that. So he's doing this because he knows that continuing the age-restricted development at the selling prices that are there now are just not feasible, number one. Number two, Lakewood needs housing. We all know that Lakewood needs housing, and they need a variety of housing. And this provides a smaller unit than is the norm in Lakewood, and I think this satisfies the need. I think we've responded to all the questions of the board. I hope we have, and I would ask for a positive vote.
Well, I can say from sitting up here, apparently the homeowners association voted 83% in favor of this project. They're the ones that live there, they're the ones that see the impact of it.
That was one of my points, yes.
Thank you.
Would ask for to see the notes regarding whether they were notified.
There is a sentence in the settlement agreement that this lot will be not age restricted.
I think it was that were they notified when they were voting that it was going to be turned inside?
Well, they voted in favor of the settlement agreement. I mean, I'm presuming they read, but they voted on it.
Sir, we all got a package.
You can't. Right. All right, you can't. Is up for a vote? Can I get a motion on appeal number 4127 Village?
I'll make a motion to approve 4127.
I have a motion by being ready to approve. Can I second? I second the vote. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gelli.
Yes.
Mr. Halverson.
No.
Mr. Langley.
I'm a little bit torn. I will be voting no, but I'm not totally against this. There are some things that I feel can be work, that it should work. But I will be voting no on this application. Mr. Tyko has a good reputation of building quality. Excuse me? He has a good reputation of building quality. I just need, I think it needs to be reworked a little.
Mr. Ribbiat.
I'm going to vote yes.
Mr. Ingram.
I would like to say that I really agree with Moshe. I don't necessarily have an issue with the developer at all, or the fact that it can be converted if it helps the residents that live there, but I do think that it's a little intense, and a couple of tweaks would really kind of make it a more functional project. So I'm gonna vote no, but I do encourage the applicant to maybe tweak it and, you know.
Mr. Gross.
I'm going to vote no, and I just want to give the reasons why I'm voting no. Because everybody else made a little speech to chicken also. It's nothing to do with the neighbors. It's nothing to do with the homeowners. Even though I do see, I think it's a little odd, but it's nothing to do with that. Just to me, when this was approved, when this is what the township had in mind, they had in mind something very specific, which is age restricted, and they had it in mind for a reason. Because of, it's a different type of density, it's a different type of quality of life, it's a whole different type of a project. You come back and then, quote unquote, sneak in apartment buildings, which are going to be a totally different type of a development. I don't think that's something that can be done over here. And therefore, I would not vote yes on any sort of variance over here. Even though, yes, you're right, you can get the density, you can do that, but I'm not going to give a variance to something that I don't think belongs in this particular neighborhood. I'm voting no.
And Mr. Gonzalez.
I would actually vote yes, and the reason why I vote yes is because the homeowners of the association were ones that voted for it at 83%. That's a majority of the homeowners, and that's why I voted yes.
The motion to approve fails by a vote of 3 in favor, 4 against.
That's correct. So this motion has been denied. Okay. So thank you. Motion to pay bills?
Make the motion.
Oh, wait, we have resolutions. What resolutions do we have?
All of them.
All You can vote. All in favor of the resolution? Aye. All against? Okay. Motion to pay bills?
Yes.
Okay. Motion to close?
Yes.
I think someone said a special meeting next week.
On the hours, on the hours. As the days go on.
Get some.